Close your eyes and imagine a forest. Not a forest you have ever walked through. Not the pine-scented woods of the mountains, not the dripping canopy of a modern rainforest. This forest has a different kind of silence. A silence that breathes, that shifts, that rustles at the edge of hearing with something you cannot name. The light here falls through leaves shaped by no wind that has ever touched the modern world. The air is warm and impossibly thick, carrying smells you have no words for. Something moves between the trees, something large. You hear it before you see it, a low resonant sound, almost below the threshold of hearing, more felt in the chest than heard in the ears. The ground trembles faintly, not from an earthquake, not from a storm. The ground trembles because something very, very old is walking nearby, something that weighs as much as a house, something with a neck that rises above the canopy and disappears into the morning mist. You are standing in a world that does not exist. You are standing in a world that could have existed, that almost existed, that was waiting to exist for 165 million years before a single piece of rock from space ended the possibility forever. Or did it? What if the rock had missed? What if, in the vast and indifferent mathematics of the solar system, the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs had simply followed a slightly different path, a deviation of seconds, of minutes, of the smallest imaginable fraction of celestial distance, and had passed harmlessly by, trailing fire across an empty sky? This is that world. This is the world that never was. And tonight, you are going to walk through it slowly, gently, with all the time in the universe, and learn everything it never got to become, not as an exercise in grief, not as a lament for what was lost, but as a genuine exploration of what the world is capable of and what life does when it is given enough time and enough room to simply be itself. There is no rush. The world that never was has been waiting for this long already. It can wait a little longer, patient as stone, while you settle into wherever you are and let your breath slow and the day's last thoughts release their grip. The story begins when you are ready. And readiness is just another word for the moment, when the mind stops insisting on its own agenda and opens to something larger than itself. Are you comfortable? Let your body find its most natural arrangement. Let your eyes stay closed, or let them close if they haven't already. The images in this story are not things to see. They are things to feel, the particular weight of 66 million years of uninterrupted life pressing gently against the imagination, the warmth of a world more full than our own, the quiet of a forest that has never been interrupted. 66 million years ago, a rock hit the Earth. That sentence is so simple it barely seems capable of containing what actually happened. A rock hit the Earth, and in the hours and days and years that followed, roughly 75% of all species that had ever evolved on this planet went extinct. Just gone. Erased. The dominant animals of the preceding 165 million years, a dynasty so long that it makes human civilization look like a single afternoon, were reduced to feathers and memory and stone impressions left in ancient mud. That rock was approximately 12 kilometers wide, about the size of Mount Everest, traveling horizontally at 43,000 miles per hour. The impact released energy equivalent to roughly 10 billion atomic bombs detonating simultaneously. The crater it left in the Yucatan Peninsula of what is now Mexico measures 180 kilometers across. And here is something most people do not know, something that makes the extinction feel even more arbitrary, even more cruel. The asteroid hit the worst possible place on Earth for life to survive. What came next? The Yucatan is built on ancient limestone and gypsum, rocks unusually rich in sulfur and carbon. When the asteroid vaporized those rocks, it released sulfuric acid aerosols and carbon dioxide into the upper atmosphere in quantities that darkened the sky for years. If that same asteroid had hit the deep ocean or the ancient granite shields of Canada or Scandinavia, the cooling effect, the impact winter that suffocated the planet, would have been dramatically less severe. Some scientists estimate the dinosaurs might have survived a deep ocean impact with only moderate extinction losses, but the rock hit Yucatan. It hit limestone and gypsum. And that was the end. Except tonight, we are going to imagine that it wasn't. We are going to imagine that the asteroid arrived at Earth 30 seconds earlier, a tiny, meaningless shift in the mathematics of space. 30 seconds earlier, and the Earth's own rotation would have carried the Yucatan slightly out of the way. The impact would have struck the deep Atlantic Ocean instead. There would still have been a tremendous event. There would still have been destruction and fire and waves, but the sulfur-laced limestone would have stayed safely underground. The skies would have cleared faster, and the creatures that ruled the land, the giants and the runners and the feathered hunters and the long-necked wanderers, would have lived. What would that world look like 66 million years later? Not 10 years later, not 1,000 years later, but 66 million years later, today, in our present moment, in the year we are living through right now. How would those survivors have changed? What would they have become? What new forms would evolution have invented in all that time, working with the raw materials of the Cretaceous rather than the mammals who took over after the impact? These are the questions we are going to spend the next few hours exploring together, quietly, gently, without hurry. And if you find yourself drifting as we walk through this imagined world, that is exactly as it should be. Let the images come and go like clouds. Let yourself move in and out of the story. The world we are building tonight is patient. It has had 66 million years to wait for you. What you are about to hear is a thought experiment built on real science, on the actual paleontology of the late Cretaceous, the actual evolutionary biology of the theropod and sauropod and ornithopod lineages, the actual ecology of the world that existed before the impact, and the actual principles that govern how ecosystems develop and diversify given time and stability. It is speculation, yes. We cannot know what the alternate world would look like in detail, and no one should pretend otherwise, but it is informed speculation anchored in what we actually know about the animals and the world they lived in, and extrapolated by the same principles that govern evolution in the actual world we can observe. It is an honest attempt to imagine what could have been, using the best tools we have for that imagining. That honesty matters. The alternate world we are building tonight is not a paradise, and it is not a utopia. It is not a world without death or predation or disease or the ordinary difficult conditions of life. It is a world that has had more time to elaborate the same fundamental processes that our world runs on, more time for diversity to accumulate, more time for relationships to deepen, more time for the cognitive gradient to steepen, more time in all the ways that more time changes things, which is, as you will see, quite dramatically. If you enjoy listening to sleepy prehistoric dinosaur stories like this, subscribe. I post stories like this weekly. And now, let us go deeper into this world that never was. To understand the world that never was, we first have to stand at the precise edge of the world that was. We have to go back to that afternoon 66 million years ago and feel the shape of the moment before everything changed. Because the end of the dinosaurs was not a slow thing. It was not a grinding down over millions of years, not a gradual losing of habitat or food or warmth. It was an afternoon, a specific afternoon, and before that afternoon arrived, the dinosaurs were not in any obvious trouble at all. Picture the Cretaceous world as it existed in those last hours before impact. The planet is warmer than it is today, lush and wet and thick with life in ways that modern ecosystems only hint at. The continents are roughly in their modern positions, though not quite. North America is split by a shallow inland sea running north to south. India is an island nation drifting northward toward Asia, not yet arrived. Europe is an archipelago of large islands. The world is recognizable but different, like a room you have been in before with all the furniture rearranged. In what will one day be the American Southwest, a herd of triceratops moves through a forest of cycads and flowering plants. They are enormous. Some of the adults measure 9 meters from nose to tail, weighing as much as 12 modern elephants. Their frills are flushed with color in the afternoon light, a riot of red and orange that serves as individual identification the way faces do for us. No two frills are exactly alike. Researchers discovered only recently that individual triceratops could be identified by the unique pattern of fenestrae, the oval openings, in their frills. They knew each other. In some sense, they recognized each other. To the east, near the inland sea, a Tyrannosaurus pauses on a ridge and tests the air with a tongue more sensitive than a dog's nose. It is not hunting at this moment. It is simply reading the world, processing a tapestry of chemical information that we can barely imagine. That tongue, lined with sensory cells capable of detecting parts per trillion of organic compounds, is gathering a complete map of who has passed this way, how recently, and in what condition. The Tyrannosaurus is thinking, not in words, not in plans the way we understand planning, but in the complex, layered way that large-brained animals process their environments. It is a creature of considerable intelligence, whatever the old textbooks may have suggested. Here is something that most accounts of the extinction leave out. The dinosaurs were thriving. Not just surviving, actually thriving, diversifying, experimenting with new forms and strategies. The hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs that moved through the late Cretaceous in enormous herds, were actually at their peak diversity in the final million years before the impact. New species were appearing, new ecological niches were being filled. The ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, cousins of Triceratops, were producing new genera at a faster rate than at any previous point in their history. The evolutionary momentum of the Cretaceous was not winding down, it was accelerating. And they were doing this while the world was already changing around them. The Deccan Traps, a vast volcanic province in what is now India, had been erupting for hundreds of thousands of years, releasing greenhouse gases and changing regional climates. The global temperature had been slowly cooling for millions of years. The shallow inland seas were retreating. Some lineages were under pressure. But the dinosaurs as a group were adapting. They always had. 165 million years of continuous adaptation was not something that ended easily. In the forests of what will be Montana, a Pachycephalosaurus raises its thick domed head and looks at nothing in particular. That dome, 12 centimeters of solid bone at the crown, is famous for its presumed role in headbutting contests. But there is something in that skull that the dome obscures from casual examination. The neural complexity within is remarkable for a non-avian dinosaur. The olfactory lobes are large. The regions associated with social processing in modern birds are well developed. The Pachycephalosaurus is not a simple animal. It navigates a world of relationships and memory and learned behavior in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. Now go to the sky. The sky of the late Cretaceous is busy in ways that no modern sky quite is. Pterosaurs still cross it, enormous Quetzalcoatlus with wingspans of 10 to 11 meters, essentially flying giraffes, feeding on the ground like vast storks. But among them are birds, actual birds, recognizable as birds, the ancestors of every feathered creature that would eventually inherit the world we live in. They share the sky with their non-avian relatives without any clear distinction between them. The line between what we call a bird and what we call a dinosaur is, in this world, entirely academic. They are all the same dynasty. And that is the point we need to hold on to as we begin to build our alternate world. The asteroid did not erase a single kind of creature. It erased an entire dynasty. A way of being alive that had run for 165 million years and was still in full flower. The rock hit the ground and the world went dark and the dynasty ended. But if the rock had not hit, if it had arrived 30 seconds earlier, or 30 seconds later, or been slightly smaller, or hit the deep ocean instead of limestone, what then? What happens when you give 165 million years of momentum 66 million more years to run? What happens is this world, the world we are building tonight, brick by slow and quiet brick, forest by imagined forest, creature by impossible creature, a world where the asteroid misses and life on land continues on the trajectory it had set for itself, a world where evolution keeps working with the tools it had available, the theropods and sauropods and ceratopsians and ornithopods and all their kin, and makes something new out of them over 66 million years of uninterrupted time. Here is the first micro-hook. The first question to hold in the back of your mind as you drift. What is 66 million years, really? Human civilization has existed for roughly 12,000 years. Agriculture has existed for roughly 10,000. The species we call Homo sapiens has existed for perhaps 300,000 years. 66 million years is 220 times longer than our entire species has been alive. It is long enough for a small, shrew-like creature to evolve into an elephant. It is long enough for a wolf-sized ancestor to become a blue whale. It is long enough to completely reinvent the animal kingdom from scratch. That is the canvas on which our alternate world is painted. In the first moments of this alternate timeline, nothing changes. The asteroid passes. The fireball does not bloom over the Yucatan. The atmosphere stays clear. The sky is blue. The dinosaurs continue their day, unaware of the catastrophe that almost found them, innocent of the 66 million years of future they have just been given. Somewhere in Montana, the Pachycephalosaurus lowers its head and wanders back into the cycad thicket. The Triceratops herd settles for the evening, the animals pressing together in the darkness for warmth and the particular comfort of proximity that herd animals have always known. The Tyrannosaurus on the ridge watches the sunset with eyes that can see colors we cannot, not just the reds and oranges visible to human vision, but ultraviolet frequencies beyond the range of our experience, painting the sky in shades for which our language has no words. It stands there as the light fails, large and patient and alive, breathing the warm air of a planet that is not yet its graveyard. And 66 million years of possibility unfold before it like a landscape seen from a great height, enormous, detailed, full of things not yet imagined. The night comes. The Cretaceous night is loud with insect sound and the calls of animals that will have no descendants in our world. The air is fragrant with the flowering plants that have been spreading across the continents for 40 million years, gradually enriching the world with a complexity that the pre-flowering Mesozoic never knew. Somewhere in the deep forest, a small, warm-blooded creature about the size of a modern rat moves carefully through the underbrush, avoiding the feet of larger animals, living the cautious and marginal life that small mammals have lived for 80 million years in the shadow of the dinosaurs. That small mammal is important. We will come back to it. Its fate in this alternate world is very different from the fate of its cousins in ours, but for now, let it pass into the shadows. Tonight belongs to the creatures that, in our timeline, have already become ghosts. The stars come out over the late Cretaceous. They are the same stars. The sky is the same sky. The universe has no opinion about which creatures survive. It does not prefer mammals to reptiles, intelligence to instinct, warmth to cold. It simply allows what is possible, and what is possible tonight, in this imagined version of a very real world, is everything. We begin our journey here, in the last ordinary day of what almost was. We begin in the warmth and noise and enormous life of the Cretaceous, carrying one simple change forward through 66 million years to see what blooms from it. Whatever you are feeling as you listen to these words, let that feeling become quiet. Let your breathing slow. Let the Cretaceous night settle around you like warm water. We have a long way to go, and all the time in the world to get there. What becomes of the dinosaurs when no asteroid comes? What becomes of the planet? What becomes of the possibility of minds, of language, of something capable of asking these questions? Let those questions rest lightly on the surface of your thoughts. Don't try to answer them yet. Just carry them with you as we walk forward into the longest thought experiment in natural history. The night passes slowly, as it always has, as it always will, and when the sun rises on the first day of this alternate world, it rises on a planet still fully, extravagantly, overwhelmingly alive with creatures we never got to know. The first 5 million years after the asteroid doesn't come are, in geological terms, a morning, a long, slow, unremarkable morning during which nothing dramatic appears to happen and everything quietly changes. This is how evolution most often works, not in sudden explosive revolutions, but in the steady accumulation of small differences, generation by generation, until you look up one day and realize the world has become unrecognizable. 5 million years. Think of what that means. The human genus, Homo, has existed for about 2.5 million years. So the gap between our alternate timeline's starting point and the first milestone we are visiting is roughly twice the entire history of the human line. In our own world, 5 million years ago, our ancestors were small, upright walking apes living in the drying forests of East Africa, not yet capable of making fire or stone tools, not yet dreaming of language. 5 million years is enough time for profound change. In the alternate world, the broad outlines of the Cretaceous persist, but they are already softening. The planet is continuing the cooling trend that had already begun before the asteroid almost arrived. The shallow inland sea that split North America is retreating, exposing new land on both sides, connecting ecosystems that had been separated by open water. The continents are drifting. India is now crashing into Asia, raising what will become the Himalayan mountains, changing the circulation of the atmosphere. The world is shifting, as it always shifts, regardless of which creatures walk across it. The dinosaurs are shifting too, not dramatically, not yet, but the pressures of a slowly cooling world are beginning to sort the survivors from the vulnerable. In the high latitudes, where winters are growing longer and darker and colder than they were in the full warmth of the Cretaceous peak, only certain kinds of dinosaurs are thriving, the ones that can generate or retain body heat. The ones that have already invested in insulation, the ones that are already, by the standards of their era, essentially warm-blooded. Here is something remarkable that most people do not know. Many dinosaurs were already effectively endothermic, warm-blooded, long before the asteroid would have struck. The evidence is in their bones, in the growth rings and vascular structures that tell paleontologists how fast different animals grew. Fast growth requires a high metabolic rate. High metabolic rates require constant body temperature regulation. The large theropods, the ornithopods, and many smaller dinosaur lineages were growing fast enough to require metabolisms that generated heat as a constant byproduct. They were warm-blooded in everything but name. In the slightly cooler world of this alternate 5 million year mark, that warmth becomes a decisive advantage. The lineages that carry it in full, especially the small and medium-sized theropods, are pushing into new territories. They are following the food is following the plants, and the plants are doing something extraordinary that has been happening since the middle of the Cretaceous and shows no sign of stopping. Flowering plants, the angiosperms, are winning. They have been winning since their appearance roughly 140 million years ago, gradually pushing aside the cycads and ferns and conifers that dominated the earlier Mesozoic. By the time of the alternate present we are visiting, 5 million years after the asteroid missed, flowering plants are exploding in diversity in ways that even the rich late Cretaceous could not fully anticipate. New species are appearing in every forest, every meadow, every riverbank. Fruits are ripening that no creature has yet evolved to eat. Flowers are opening that no pollinator has yet learned to visit. And the herbivorous dinosaurs notice. Of course they notice. The hadrosaurs, those supremely successful duck-billed grazers and browsers, have always been opportunistic in their feeding habits. Their dental batteries, complex arrangements of hundreds of teeth that grind against each other in layered rows, replacing themselves continuously, are some of the most sophisticated plant processing equipment ever evolved. In the new world of proliferating flowering plants, those dental batteries are working harder than ever. New foods require new processing strategies. New processing strategies drive new dental evolution. 5 million years in, and the hadrosaurs are already showing the first signs of a split. In the northern continents, where the cooling is most pronounced and the plants shifting most dramatically, some lineages are developing more complex crests, those hollow skull structures that earlier paleontologists dismissed as mere decoration, but which we now know functioned as resonating chambers for low-frequency vocalizations. The northern hadrosaurs are getting louder, more communicative. The social complexity of their herds, already considerable, is deepening. Meanwhile, in the southern continents, in what is now South America and Africa, which are still connected to each other and to the remnants of the ancient southern supercontinent, the titanosaur sauropods are not going anywhere. These are the giants, the true giants. Some species in the late Cretaceous already exceeded 70 tons in body weight. In the alternate world, freed from the competition that the asteroid's aftermath would have cleared away, the titanosaurs are free to continue what they had been doing, growing, taking up space, eating enormous quantities of vegetation, and walking slowly through landscapes they reshape just by existing. Here is something wonderful about sauropods that is rarely discussed in popular accounts. They were ecosystem engineers on a scale that had no parallel in the Mesozoic and has no parallel in our modern world. The largest titanosaurs consumed perhaps a ton of vegetation per day. Walking in herds of dozens or hundreds of individuals, they transformed forests into open woodland into grassland-like environments back into forest over the course of decades as vegetation recovered. They were living rototillers, living clearers of undergrowth. The world that existed around a titanosaur herd was profoundly different from the world that would exist a century after they had moved on. In the alternate 5 million year world, the titanosaurs are doing this on an expanded scale. They have expanded their range northward as former Cretaceous specialists vacated territory, in regions where their cooling-sensitive metabolisms can still be maintained, roughly the latitudes of modern Mexico and the Mediterranean. They are reshaping the landscape with every slow, patient footfall. The Tyrannosaurus lineage is changing too, though not in the ways you might expect. Tyrannosaurus itself, that specific species, does not survive unchanged for millions of years. Nothing does. But its relatives, the Tyrannosaur family, the broad group of large, two-legged predators with reduced forelimbs and enormous skulls filled with teeth designed for processing bone as well as flesh, that group is diversifying. In a world without the extinction bottleneck, the Tyrannosaur body plan, which was already proving enormously successful, has room to explore new possibilities. Smaller forms, more lightly built forms adapted to different prey and different hunting strategies. 5 million years in, there is already a tyrannosaur in the northern forests that is not Tyrannosaurus rex and is not its direct descendant, but is its cousin, a sleeker animal, faster, with longer arms than its predecessor, filling the niche of a pursuit predator rather than an ambush predator. It hunts differently. It moves differently. It has a brain case slightly larger than Tyrannosaurus, not because anyone was selecting for intelligence specifically, but because larger brains go hand in hand with more complex hunting strategies, and more complex hunting strategies go hand in hand with survival in a world that is slowly, steadily growing more complex. What does this mean? It means that in the first 5 million years of the alternate timeline, evolution is doing exactly what it always does when pressure and opportunity align. It is producing new forms, not revolutionary ones yet, not the dramatic departures that will come with more time, but the first notes of a new symphony, building on the themes of the Cretaceous, exploring harmonics that the old world never quite reached. In the warm evenings of this alternate world, 5 million years after the asteroid missed, a landscape that you could recognize as Cretaceous but couldn't quite place would be settling into darkness. The animals going quiet as the sun goes down include some familiar shapes and many unfamiliar ones. The calls they make to each other across the cooling air are sounds that our ears will never hear in our timeline. Some are low and resonant, traveling through the ground as much as through the air. Some are high and brief, used for close-range communication within family groups. Some are simply exhalations, the sound of enormous bodies breathing in the dark. Hold that image lightly. The world 5 million years into an alternate history, alive in ways our world is not, moving in directions we never got to see. Let it settle in your mind like water into soil, finding its own level, its own quiet place. You are drifting now, perhaps. Let yourself drift. The story will be here when you resurface, patient as stone, old as the planet. 5 million years is just the beginning. We have 61 million more to go. 10 million years into the alternate world, and the most dramatic transformation is not happening in the animals at all. It is happening in the plants. Stand in the alternate world's 10th year and look in any direction, and the thing that would strike you first, before the dinosaurs, before the changed skies, before anything else, is the vegetation, the sheer, overwhelming, almost oppressive density of the vegetation. In our world, the forests of the late Cretaceous were already impressive, but they were also, by the standards of what came after, relatively young in their particular forms. The flowering plants, the angiosperms, had only been diversifying for 60 or 70 million years by the KPG boundary. They had been doing extraordinary things in that time, producing fruits and flowers and the relationships with insects and birds that those structures require. But 70 million years is not a long time in the context of plant evolution. The forests of the late Cretaceous were still building their architecture. In the alternate world, those forests get 10 million more years to build, then 20 million, then 30. Without the KPG extinction burning and clearing and depositing an ash layer that reset so many ecosystems simultaneously, the late Cretaceous forest architecture continues to develop, to deepen, to accumulate the biological complexity that only time produces. Soils deepen, mycorrhizal networks expand. The chemical relationships between soil organisms and root systems become more elaborate. The forests get old in the way that only forests that have never been cleared can get old. Not older in the sense of individual trees lasting longer, but older in the sense of accumulated relationship, of layered history, of a system that knows itself. At the 10 million year mark, the alternate world's forests differ from their Cretaceous predecessors in ways that a botanist from our world would immediately recognize and struggle to fully articulate. The diversity is higher. Not just more species in total, but more species per unit area, more fine-grained subdivision of the available ecological space, more specialization, more cases of species that do one specific thing in one specific microhabitat better than anything else alive. This is what ecologists call niche partitioning, and it is one of the signatures of a mature, stable, long undisturbed ecosystem. The flowering plant diversity is extraordinary. In our world, the angiosperms diversified after the KPG extinction into the roughly 300,000 species that exist today. Most of that diversification happened in the 66 million years since the extinction. In the alternate world, the angiosperms have been diversifying for 10 million additional years from a base that was already, by the KPG era, perhaps 100,000 species strong. The arithmetic is not straightforward. Diversification rates are not constant, and more species means more competition and more extinction as well as more speciation. But the result is a flowering plant diversity that exceeds our world's by some meaningful amount. What this means in practical terms is fruit, abundance of fruit, an extraordinary variety of fruits, in every size and color and chemical composition produced by plants that have been co-evolving with the animals that disperse their seeds for 10 million additional years. Fruits that are tailored in their chemistry and their color and the timing of their ripening to the specific sensory systems of the specific animals that eat them and carry their seeds. And because the dominant seed dispersers in the alternate world's forests are dinosaurs rather than mammals and birds, the fruits are tailored to dinosaur sensory systems, to the ultraviolet color vision and the chemical sensitivity of the herbivorous dinosaur lineages. In the forests of the alternate world's 10 million year mark, there are fruits that ripen to colors only visible in the ultraviolet. There are fruits whose chemical volatiles are specifically tuned to the olfactory systems of hadrosaurs. There are fruits, small, hard-shelled, producing almost no smell or visual signal from a human perspective, that are perfectly matched to the sensory profile of a specific small theropod that is the only animal efficient at dispersing their seeds. These relationships have been built over 10 million years of coevolution, and they are precise in ways that a visiting botanist could spend a career unpacking. The forests have also developed vertically in ways the Cretaceous could not fully anticipate. The canopy in mature alternate forests at the 10 million year mark is multi-layered in a way that our old-growth forests hint at but cannot quite achieve. There is the emergent layer, the tallest trees rising above the main canopy, their crowns isolated in a world of light and wind. Below them, the main canopy, a more or less continuous roof of interlocking branches. Below that, the sub-canopy, the shade-adapted trees that live their entire lives in the dim world beneath the main canopy, but above the forest floor. And then the shrub layer, the herb layer, and finally the forest floor itself. Each layer has its own climate, its own humidity profile, its own light regime, its own community of organisms specialized for its particular conditions. And because the alternate world's forests have had 10 million more years to develop these layers, each layer is more richly inhabited, more finely subdivided, more elaborately connected to the others than anything our own forests currently contain. The dinosaurs that live in and around these forests have been changing in response to them. The relationship between habitat and animal is always bidirectional. The animals shape the habitat through their feeding and movement and fertilization, and the habitat shapes the animals through the specific resources it provides and the specific challenges it presents. In 10 million years of mutual shaping, the alternate world's dinosaurs and their forests have become fitted to each other in ways that are subtle but pervasive. The herbivorous dinosaurs have developed feeding preferences that reflect the specific nutritional chemistry of the alternate world's plants. Certain hadrosaur lineages have become specialists on certain fruit lineages, not exclusively, not to the point of vulnerability if the fruit fails in a bad year, but preferentially, with the same kind of soft specialization that characterizes the dietary preferences of many of our world's large herbivores. And the plants have responded by producing fruit at the times and in the places where those specific herbivores are most likely to find it, timing their ripening to the migration patterns of the hadrosaur herds, concentrating their fruiting trees along the routes that the herds follow year after year. The forest floor of the alternate world's 10 million year mark deserves a moment of attention. It is different from the floor of any forest in our world, not just in its specific plant composition, but in its texture and chemistry. 66 million years of accumulated leaf litter without the disruptive fire cycle that characterizes many modern forests. The alternate world's forests are wetter and less prone to fire than our own, because the larger dinosaur populations maintain more open waterways and their enormous drinking and wallowing activities create fire breaks, has built a soil of extraordinary depth and complexity. The top layer of this soil is not really soil in the conventional sense. It is a mat of partially decomposed organic matter, fungal mycelium, root material, and the diverse community of organisms that live in and on it, extending in some places to a depth of a meter or more before the actual mineral soil begins. This mat is extraordinarily productive. It cycles nutrients at a rate that our own agricultural soils, for all their management, struggle to match. It is the engine of the alternate world's forest productivity, and it runs on the accumulated input of 10 million years of leaves and droppings and the bodies of animals dying in the forest and being processed back into soil. The smell of this forest floor is specific, rich and deep and complex in a way that a single breath could not fully inventory. There is the base note of fungal activity, not unpleasant, more earthy and dense than the sharper fungal smells of our world's forests, because the alternate fungi have had more time to develop their specific aromatic signatures. There is the sweetness of fermenting fruit, because fallen fruit is everywhere in this season. There is the cool mineral smell that comes from deep soil rising through the mat when the temperature drops at night and the soil breathes. And there are the sounds that come from the floor. The sounds you don't notice at first because they are below the threshold that draws attention. The rustle of something small in the mat, the occasional crack of a branch somewhere deeper in the forest, the dripping of water from one leaf surface to another in a forest so saturated with moisture that the leaves themselves become temporary water storage. In the alternate world's 10 million year forest, the floor is as alive as the canopy, as complex, as full of evolutionary history. You could spend a lifetime here and not exhaust what there is to know. You could study the mycorrhizal network beneath this single hectare of forest floor and not finish in one human lifetime. You could catalogue the insect species in the canopy of a single large tree and publish papers for years. This is the depth of complexity that 10 million years of uninterrupted life produces, and it is beautiful in the way that all true complexity is beautiful. Not simple, not clear, not easily summarized, but full in a way that makes the mind go quiet. Let the forest be full around you. Let the sounds layer and the smells deepen. Let the details blur into the general richness of a world that has had more time than we ever got to be completely itself. The sun is moving through the canopy, and the shadows are shifting, and somewhere overhead, in the bright world above the canopy mat, something with wings is calling. A sound that is almost birdsong, almost but not quite, different in its cadence and its tone in ways that mark it as belonging to a world that has been heading slightly differently for 10 million years. The forest breathes. You breathe with it. 10 million years of patience available to you tonight in the space between the last waking thought and the first proper sleep. 20 million years have passed in our alternate timeline. The world is now 46 million years before our present moment, and the first thing you would notice, if you could somehow stand in it, is the trees. Not individual trees, not a forest, but a quality of treeness that exists on a scale our experience cannot contain. Trees that have never been cut, never been logged, never been cleared for agriculture or road or city. Trees that have been accumulating and growing and replacing each other for longer than our species has existed, building soils richer than anything our world now holds. But looking up into those trees, you would also notice the gaps. The extraordinary gaps. Clearings that appear in the forest at irregular intervals, where something enormous has passed through and pushed down the canopy the way a hand pushes down tall grass. These clearings are fresh, the broken wood still pale, the churned earth still fragrant. Whatever made them was here recently. And when you look at the track in the soft ground at the clearing's edge, it is wider than a dining table and nearly as deep. The sauropods, the titanosaurs, the largest animals that have ever walked the surface of any planet we know about, continuing their long and patient reign, now 20 million years deep into the alternate world, and showing no signs of slowing their occupation of the landscape. If anything, they are more diverse than they were at the KPG boundary. New forms have emerged, some stockier, some longer-necked, some specialized for different feeding heights that allow multiple species to coexist in the same forest without direct competition. There is something hypnotic about imagining a titanosaur moving through a forest. These animals were so massive that they occupied a different relationship to time than we do, not just in their long lifespans, which some individuals stretch to 80 or 90 years based on growth ring analysis of their fossilized bones, but in the sheer slowness of their movement. A titanosaur at full walking speed covered ground at roughly 4 kilometers per hour, the same pace as a leisurely human stroll. But the ground shook under each step, and the displaced air moved in gentle waves through the surrounding vegetation, and everything nearby, the birds, the smaller dinosaurs, the insects and lizards in the undergrowth, simply accommodated itself to the passage of something that large without comment. In our alternate 20 million year world, the titanosaurs are doing something important that goes beyond simply being large. They are, in the most literal sense, making the world. Their feeding strips canopy from the tallest trees, allowing light to reach the forest floor. Their droppings, deposited in enormous quantities as they walk, scatter seeds across hundreds of kilometers of territory. Their paths, walked again and again over generations until they become permanent corridors of compressed earth, function as drainage channels for the rain and travel routes for smaller animals. And their digestive systems, those vast fermentation chambers inside bodies the size of buildings, are producing methane in quantities significant enough to influence the composition of the atmosphere. Recent research into the methane output of modern large herbivores has given us tools to estimate what titanosaur-level populations would have contributed to greenhouse gas levels. The numbers are not trivial. In a world where titanosaurs still roam in their Cretaceous abundance, and in the alternate timeline, without the asteroid's aftermath thinning their numbers, their abundance may be even greater, they are functioning as living climate regulators. Their contribution to atmospheric methane, combined with the altered albedo of the forests they maintain, creates a slightly warmer world than would otherwise exist as the planet continues its post-Cretaceous cooling trend. This is one of the subtle and beautiful things about the alternate timeline. The dinosaurs are not just living in the world, they are making it. The specific configuration of forests and clearings and river courses and soil chemistry that exists 20 million years in is a product, in significant part, of what the animals in it have done, are doing, will do. Just as the world we inhabit is partly a product of what our species has done to it, clearing, cultivating, burning, the alternate world is a product of what its dominant animals do to it by simply being themselves at enormous scale. But the world is not all sauropods. The forests around the titanosaur herds are full of other life, much of it descended from forms that existed at the KPG boundary, and much of it already diverged from those ancestral forms in ways that would have surprised a Cretaceous naturalist. The ornithopods, the bipedal or semi-bipedal plant eaters that included the hadrosaurs, have diversified into the ecological space previously occupied by mammals in our world, not by becoming mammal-like in form, but by filling similar functional roles with dinosaur anatomy. There are small ornithopods, descendants of the hypsilophodontids, that live and move and forage in ways remarkably similar to modern deer. They browse selectively, choosing the most nutritious new growth. They gather in loose groups that offer collective vigilance against predators. They mark territories with scent glands that have evolved independently of any mammalian equivalent along their flanks. They are not mammals. They move differently, breathe differently, reproduce differently. But from a distance, from the purely functional standpoint of what role they fill in their ecosystem, they occupy the same space that deer and antelope occupy in ours. This is a principle that evolutionary biologists call convergent evolution, the tendency of unrelated lineages, given similar environmental pressures, to arrive at similar functional solutions. In our world, the mammals that survived the KPG extinction filled the ecological roles vacated by the dinosaurs, and many of them converged on forms that look, functionally, like small versions of their dinosaur predecessors. In the alternate world, the reverse is true. The dinosaurian lineages fill the ecological roles that might otherwise have been occupied by mammals, and they converge, structurally, functionally, on forms that do the same jobs by different means. The question that should be drifting at the back of your mind as you absorb all of this is, what about the mammals? The small, warm-blooded, mostly nocturnal creatures that shared the late Cretaceous with the dinosaurs, what happens to them in this alternate world? They didn't go extinct at the KPG boundary because there is no KPG boundary, but they also don't inherit the Earth the way they do in our timeline. They are still here, but here is different. 20 million years in, the mammals of the alternate world are diverse. There are perhaps as many mammal species as existed in the late Cretaceous, but they are small, remarkably, persistently, uniformly small. The largest mammal species in the alternate world, 20 million years after the asteroid missed, is roughly the size of a modern beaver. Most are smaller than that, the size of rats, voles, shrews. They live in burrows and tree hollows and dense undergrowth. They are nocturnal. They are fast reproducing and wide-ranging and supremely adaptable, but they are not large. They have not been given the ecological permission to be large. In our world, the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs cleared the ecological space for large mammals to evolve. With that space gone, nothing invited them. Nothing made it advantageous to grow beyond the small to medium size that fits under the radar of the large theropods that still roam the forests. Mammals in the alternate world are not failures. They are survivors, thriving in their nocturnal niche, filling the ground-level insectivore and small herbivore roles that will never be dominated by a triceratops. But they are forever small. And here is the uncomfortable implication that we will return to later in the quiet of the night, when the other questions have settled. If mammals remain small in the alternate world, what happens to the evolutionary line that eventually produced us? What happens to the primates? The large-brained, social, manipulative-handed line that in our world produced apes and then hominids, and then, in the late geological afternoon, the creature sitting or lying in this moment listening to these words. Let that question wait. It is a heavy one and needs to be approached slowly, with care. For now, let us stay with the giants. Let us stay in the deep forest 20 million years into the alternate world, where the titanosaurs walk their ancient routes and the ornithopods browse the canopy gaps, and the first faint outlines of an entirely new kind of world are beginning to emerge from the raw material of deep time. The evening in this forest has a particular quality. The light filtering through the canopy is greenish and diffuse, broken by the slow movement of enormous bodies passing between the trees at the forest's edge. The air smells of wet wood and crushed vegetation, and the faint, complicated sweetness of flowering plants that have had 20 million more years to develop their chemistry and their relationships with the animals that pollinate them and disperse their seeds. Everything is a little more complex than you might expect. Everything is richer, layered, ancient in a way that our own most ancient forests can only gesture toward. Somewhere in the canopy, at the level that a very tall dinosaur's head might brush, there is movement. Not a dinosaur. The movement is too light, too quick. But it is something with feathers, something with wings, something descended from a lineage that, in our world, would call themselves birds, but in this world has no name at all, because there is no taxonomic authority here to draw lines between the feathered and the non-feathered. There is only the spectrum of form, continuous and beautiful from ground to sky. Sleep calls. Let the forest hold you. Let the evening come down through the canopy in layers of darkening green. The giants are moving toward the waterhole in the last light, raising their long necks now and then to scan the horizon with eyes that see in colors we cannot imagine. The world is immense and old and full of creatures who have never heard of us. Rest in that thought. Let it be comfortable. 30 million years into the alternate world and the sky is doing something extraordinary. Look up, really look. Not just the obvious, not just the pterosaurs still crossing overhead, their vast wings casting moving shadows across the canopy, but the finer details, the quick movements at the edges of vision, the shapes that dart between branches or spiral upward on thermal columns rising from sun-heated clearings. The sky is full of things that are neither quite what we would call birds nor what we would call dinosaurs, because in 30 million years of uninterrupted evolution, that distinction has become completely meaningless. In our world, the birds that survived the KPG extinction had a runway of 66 million years to diversify and explore every possible aerial and terrestrial niche. They became albatrosses and hummingbirds and penguins and ostriches and everything in between. The breadth of modern bird diversity is a testament to what 66 million years of evolution can do with a single ancestral body plan when given freedom to explore. In the alternate world, that same process has been happening for 30 million years, but with a much larger starting population and a much more crowded sky. The birds that existed at the KPG boundary in our world were themselves diverse. There were already dozens of lineages, some quite different from each other. In the alternate world, those lineages have been evolving for 30 million extra years without the brutal filter of a mass extinction thinning them. And alongside them, the non-avian theropods have been doing something that should have been obvious from the start: getting smaller. Many of them have been getting smaller, generation by generation, as smaller individuals prove more nimble, more thermally efficient, more able to exploit the high-energy world of insectivory and seed-eating that exists just above the ground in the dense undergrowth. Smaller theropods with feathers, evolving in the direction of lighter weight and more efficient movement, are finding themselves in a place that their large ancestors could never occupy: the air. Not all of them, not most of them, but some lineages, in the alternate world's 30 million year mark, are producing forms that blur the line between gliding and flying, between leaping and the first true powered flight. This is not the origin of flight that happened in the Cretaceous from the avian line. This is flight happening again, independently, from non-avian lines that have been pushed by evolution toward the same solution by the same pressures. There is a term for this: parallel evolution, the same solution reached by different paths, driven by the same environmental pressures. In our world, flight evolved independently in insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats. In the alternate world, within the dinosaur dynasty alone, flight is evolving multiple times in the 30 million years since the asteroid missed, in the avian line, which was already flying, and in at least 2 or 3 non-avian theropod lineages that have been squeezed by competition and cooling toward the same high-reward strategy of accessing food that nothing else can reach. What does this do to the sky? It fills it. It makes it a theater of convergent and divergent evolution playing out in real time, decade by decade, century by century. At the 30 million year mark in the alternate world, the sky above a temperate forest contains creatures recognizable as modern birds alongside creatures that have no equivalent in any natural history we know. Some are gliders, perfecting the art of thermal navigation. Some are true flappers, small and frantic and impossibly fast, chasing the insects that have also been diversifying without the KPG filter. Some are large, not pterosaur large, but large by the standards of modern birds, the size of eagles or larger, with skeletal features that mark them as descended from non-avian theropods rather than from the avian line. The feathers themselves deserve a moment of attention. Dinosaur feathers were already complex in the late Cretaceous. Not just filamentous proto-feathers, but sophisticated pennaceous feathers with barbules and hooks, capable of complex color and iridescent display. In 30 million years of continued evolution, feathers in the alternate world have had 30 million more years to develop their chemistry. The melanosomes, the pigment-containing structures within feathers, have elaborated in ways that produce colors and patterns with no equivalent in modern bird plumage. Iridescent structures that shift color in ultraviolet light, visible to the highly developed color vision of the animals displaying them, but invisible to creatures like us who cannot see that far into the spectrum. This is important. Dinosaurs had exceptionally well-developed color vision, better in several measured dimensions than human vision. 4 types of color-sensitive cones in the eye versus our 3, with the 4th type sensitive to ultraviolet frequencies. This means that the visual world of the dinosaurs was more information-rich than ours. Social signaling through visual display had been elaborate since at least the middle of the Mesozoic. In the alternate world's 30 million years of additional evolution, that visual complexity has deepened into something we could barely appreciate even if we stood in the middle of it, because we would be blind to the frequencies in which most of the information is carried. Think about what that means for the complexity of social life in the alternate world. We tend to think of intelligence and social complexity as requiring language, or at least sound. But complex visual communication, structured, nuanced, individually differentiated, is another pathway to rich social life. The cephalopods, the octopuses, and cuttlefish have elaborate visual communication systems that encode information in the rapid shifting of chromatophores across their skin. In the alternate world, the feathered theropods and their avian relatives have had 30 million additional years to develop the visual equivalent of language. Structured, learned, culturally transmitted patterns of display that carry information about identity, status, intention, and emotional state. Imagine standing in the alternate 30 million year world and watching a group of medium-sized theropods interact at a forest clearing. The exchange going on among them, invisible to your 3-color vision, would be a conversation as rich as anything produced by early hominids. Not conversation in words, but conversation nonetheless, in light, in pattern, in the subtle language of color that evolution has been teaching these animals for 195 million years. The micro hook here, the question to hold as you drift. Does visual complexity lead to cognitive complexity? Does the need to process and produce elaborate visual signals drive the evolution of larger, more sophisticated brains? In our world, social primates developed large brains partly in response to the demands of complex social life. In the alternate world, where the social demands include processing and generating complex visual information in multiple color channels, what does that do to the neural architecture of the animals involved? We are not yet at the point where that question has a clear answer. 30 million years is not long enough for the dramatic changes that would be needed, but it is long enough to see the direction of travel. The theropod lineages with the most complex social structures, the ones engaging in the most elaborate visual exchange, navigating the most intricate social hierarchies, are, on average, showing brain-to-body ratios slightly above their late Cretaceous ancestors. Not dramatically, not yet. But the slope is there. Evolution is beginning to pay dividends on the investment in complexity. The cooling world is also changing the distribution of dinosaur life in ways that will matter later. The tropics remain rich and warm, hosting the greatest diversity of large dinosaur forms, sauropods and large theropods, and the ornithopod grazers in their enormous herds. But the temperate and subarctic zones are becoming home to something different. Smaller, faster, better insulated dinosaurs that have been forced by colder winters to develop more sophisticated thermoregulation and more complex foraging strategies. These high-latitude lineages are, in 30 million years, already showing something that the tropical giants are not: a higher baseline metabolic rate, more complex behavior, smaller social groups with tighter individual bonds. The cold is an intelligence pressure. Surviving winter requires planning, understanding the seasonal cycle, knowing where food can be found when summer's abundance is gone, making decisions about when to move and where to go. The polar dinosaurs of the alternate world, and yes, dinosaurs had already been living above the Arctic Circle in the Cretaceous in regions with months of continuous darkness, are being quietly, steadily shaped by the cognitive demands of their difficult environment. The sun is moving toward the western horizon in the alternate 30 million year world. The sky above a temperate forest is busy with the shapes of flying things, each following its own flight plan, navigating by landmarks and thermal currents and probably magnetic fields, because evidence from the KPG era suggests some dinosaur lineages may have already developed magnetic navigation, the ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field the way modern birds do for long-distance migration. The sky is complex in ways our own sky has lost. The sound is complex too. The calls of the flying animals mix with the lower vocalizations of ground-dwelling dinosaurs, creating a layered acoustic environment that a careful listener might begin to parse into information, territory, identity, alarm, invitation. The forest has a voice, and it is not quite like any voice our world knows. Deeper in some frequencies, more varied in others, full of harmonics, that the extraordinary resonating structures in some hadrosaur crests and some theropod throat pouches are capable of producing. Let the sound surround you. Let the sky fill with its 30-million-year shapes. Let your body settle and your breathing slow. You are a visitor in a world that is becoming increasingly strange, increasingly different from the one you know, and that strangeness is not threatening but wonderful. The wonder of seeing what time can do when it is given enough of itself to work with. The night comes to the alternate world as it always does, bringing its own sounds and its own silences, and tomorrow, in the timescale of the story we are telling, another 10 million years will pass and the world will be stranger still. 45 million years into the alternate world. We need to pause here, at this particular point in the story, and sit with a question that has been building in the background of everything we have discussed so far. It is the question that the alternate world makes unavoidable. It is the question that paleontologist Dale Russell explored in the 1980s when he proposed his famous and sometimes dismissed thought experiment, the Dinosauroid. If certain small-brained theropods had continued to evolve for millions of years without the asteroid cutting their line short, could something like intelligence have emerged? Let us approach this carefully. The word intelligence is complicated, contested, and often imprecisely used. When we ask whether dinosaurs could have become intelligent, we need to first decide what we mean. If we mean human-level language and abstract reasoning and the ability to write poetry and build computers, then we are asking a very specific and narrow question. If we mean complex problem-solving, long-term planning, individual recognition, cultural transmission of learned behaviors, and flexible response to novel situations, then we are asking a much more interesting and answerable question. By those second standards, some dinosaurs were already showing the precursors. The troodontids, a family of small feathered theropods that includes Troodon formosus and its relatives, had the highest encephalization quotient of any known non-avian dinosaur. Encephalization quotient is the ratio of actual brain size to the brain size predicted for an animal of a given body weight, and it correlates well across living animals with behavioral complexity. Modern crows and parrots, both descended from dinosaurs, have encephalization quotients that rival primates. The troodontids had encephalization quotients well above the dinosaur average, in ranges that, in living animals, indicate the capacity for complex learned behavior. But it is not just brain size that matters, it is the architecture of the brain. And here is something that paleoneurologists, scientists who study the structure of fossilized brains through endocasts, impressions left in skull cavities, have found in the Cretaceous theropods. The regions of the brain associated with advanced sensory processing and behavioral flexibility were already enlarged. The cerebrum. The structures involved in integrating sensory information from multiple sources. The pathways that connect perception to action in ways that allow flexible, learned responses rather than fixed, instinctive ones. In the alternate world's 45 million years, the troodontid lineage has not been standing still. It has had 45 million years to follow the gradient that evolution was already establishing. And here is what 45 million years of gradual brain expansion looks like in a lineage that was already well above average. Not a sudden transformation, not the appearance of a creature sitting down and writing philosophy, but a steady cumulative deepening of the cognitive toolkit. Better memory, better problem solving, better social intelligence. The alternate troodontids of this era are still recognizably theropods. They are still bipedal, still feathered, still the size of medium dogs to large turkeys. But their behavior has changed in ways that a careful observer would notice. They live in stable social groups with recognized individual roles and long-term relationships. They care for their young for extended periods after hatching, not just weeks but months, during which the young animals learn behavioral repertoires that their nervous systems are not capable of improvising independently. They use sticks and stones in ways that go beyond simple manipulation, wedging prey into crevices, using hard surfaces to crack shells, occasionally moving objects to access food underneath them. Is this tool use? That depends on how you define tools. By the broadest definition, yes. They are using objects to extend the reach and force of their own bodies, which is the fundamental definition of tool use. By the narrower definition used for primate intelligence studies, shaped tools, tools made rather than found, tools designed in advance for a task not yet encountered, it is not quite there. Not yet. But 45 million years is not the end of the story. There is something else in the troodontid lineage at the 45 million year mark that deserves attention. They are vocalizing in structured ways. Not random calls, not simple alarm signals, but patterned sequences of sound that vary systematically with context. The same sequence is produced by multiple individuals in similar situations. Young animals learn the sequences by exposure, not by instinct. Raised in isolation from adults, they produce impoverished versions of the adult calls, missing elements that their nervous systems apparently do not supply automatically but must acquire through experience. This is vocal learning, and vocal learning is one of the rarest and most cognitively demanding abilities in the animal kingdom. In our world, vocal learning has evolved independently in only a handful of groups: humans, great apes to a limited degree, some cetaceans, whales and dolphins, some bats, and a subset of birds, the parrots and songbirds. Every group that has evolved vocal learning is also a group we consider cognitively sophisticated because the neural machinery required for vocal learning, the ability to hear a sound, compare it to an internal model, modify your own vocal output to match the Model E, is cognitively demanding machinery that proves useful for other kinds of flexible behavior too. The alternate troodontids have it. They have evolved vocal learning independently of the avian line, or possibly in parallel with it, since birds descended from theropods already had elements of vocal learning in the Cretaceous. Either way, 45 million years of evolution has produced in this lineage something remarkable: animals that communicate in structured, learned, culturally transmitted sequences of sound. Not language, not syntax, not semantics in the human sense, but something that occupies the same functional space that proto-language occupied in our own ancestors before language proper emerged. The question that drifts here, gently, at the edge of sleep: is this the beginning of something? Is what we are watching in the alternate 45 million year world the early stages of a trajectory that will, given more time, produce something we would recognize as a mind, not our kind of mind? A different architecture, different sensory emphasis, different social structure, different relationship to time and memory and learning, but something that looks at the world and thinks about what it sees. We cannot answer that question yet. The answer requires more time. But hold it with you as we continue. The question of the troodontid mind, building in the alternate world's long afternoon like weather building before a storm. Something is happening in the cognitive history of that lineage. We will check back in later when more time has passed. For now, the alternate world at 45 million years is a place of enormous and quiet activity. The sauropods continue their slow renovation of the landscape. The hadrosaurs browse in their vast herds. The polar regions have produced lineages of smaller, compact dinosaurs that are beginning to show the physiological signatures of true hibernation, a feat that would have seemed impossible for a large-bodied reptile at the start of the Mesozoic, but that 65 million years of evolution after the asteroid mist has made unremarkable. The oceans too are changing. The marine reptile fauna, the ichthyosaurs, the mosasaurs, the long-necked plesiosaurs that filled Cretaceous seas with the same awe-inspiring scale that whales fill ours, has continued to diversify. The mosasaurs in particular have proved adaptable. In our world, they were spectacularly successful Cretaceous predators that went entirely extinct at the KPG boundary. In the alternate world, they survived. And having survived, they have had 45 million years to refine and expand what was already a highly successful body plan. But we will visit the oceans in their own time. For now, stay with the land. Stay with the forest and the herd and the slow, patient intelligence building in the troodontid lineage. Feel the weight of 45 million years settling around you like sediment settling in still water, layer by layer, quietly, without hurry. You are halfway through the night, perhaps, or deep into it, or just at the edge of it. Wherever you are, let your body go heavy. Let the sounds of the alternate world fade from sharp to soft to the gentle murmur of a story still telling itself in the background of sleep. The troodontids are still out there, in the forest of a world that never was, learning their learned songs, solving their small problems, dreaming their unknown dreams. What do dinosaurs dream of? We have no way to know. But the neural structures associated with REM sleep, the stage of sleep in which dreaming occurs in mammals, are present in birds, which are dinosaurs. Whatever birds dream, non-avian dinosaurs may have dreamed of too. In the alternate world, in the cooling night of the 45-million-year forest, they are dreaming, and the world they dream of is not so different from the world they wake to. We have been following the large stories, the sauropod kingdoms, the developing minds, the ocean empires, but every ecosystem has its small stories, and the alternate world's small stories deserve their own quiet chapter. Because the small lives of the alternate world are not minor, they are not footnotes. They are the foundation on which all the larger stories rest, and they are doing something in the alternate world that they have never been allowed to do in ours. They are being fully, completely, elaborately themselves, without interruption, for 66 million years. The mammals. We have visited them briefly at several points in our journey through the alternate world, noting at each stop that they remain small, remain nocturnal, remain in the ecological spaces that the dominant dinosaurian fauna leaves open. By the 50-million-year mark where we check in on them now, this is still true. The largest mammals in the alternate world are still roughly the size of a beaver. Most are smaller. They fill the insectivore to small herbivore spectrum with extraordinary diversity. Hundreds of species across every continent, each adapted to its specific nocturnal microhabitat with the precision that only millions of years of selection pressure can produce. But do not picture them as failures. This is the most important thing to understand about the alternate world's small mammals. They are not what happens when mammals don't get a chance. They are what happens when mammals have 66 million years to refine the small body, nocturnal, cognitively flexible lifestyle without ever being pushed to abandon it. They are the world's most specialized practitioners of a suite of capabilities that our world's small mammals have, but have developed in a different context. The nocturnal mammals of the alternate world have sensory systems that go beyond anything their Cretaceous ancestors possessed. Their hearing covers a frequency range that extends well into the ultrasonic, not quite the full echolocation of modern bats, but approaching it in some lineages that have begun to use brief ultrasonic pulses to navigate and detect prey in the complete darkness of the forest floor. Their olfactory systems are, by the standard of our world's mammals, extraordinary, capable of detecting and distinguishing hundreds of individual chemical signals that the alternate forest floor produces in the course of a night. And their brains are larger than their Cretaceous ancestors, not larger in the absolute sense. The bodies remain small, and brain size scales with body size in ways that are constrained by metabolism. But the brain-to-body ratio of the alternate world's small mammals, 50 million years into the alternate timeline, is higher than that of their Cretaceous equivalents. The specific regions that have grown are the olfactory processing areas, not surprising, given the sensory demands of their nocturnal world, and the memory and spatial navigation regions, for the same reason that polar dinosaurs developed enhanced memory. Navigating a complex environment in the dark requires a spatial map of high fidelity. Here is a lesser-known fact about memory in small mammals that matters for the alternate world story. Episodic memory, the ability to remember specific past events, not just categories of experience but actual individual occurrences, was long thought to be a uniquely human capability, or at most shared with a few close primate relatives. We now know it is present in many small mammals, including rats and mice. The alternate world's small mammals have had 50 million additional years to elaborate their episodic memory systems. In the cognitive arms race we described in the nighttime chapter, individual recognition and individual specific memory are survival tools. The alternate small mammals remember specific individuals, specific predators, specific competitors, in ways that our own small mammals can only hint at. The social structures of the alternate world's small mammals are also more complex than you might expect. In our world, small mammals are often relatively asocial. They live and forage independently, coming together mainly for reproduction. This is partly a consequence of the energy economics of small bodies. A small animal cannot afford to share its food sources with others unless the social benefit clearly outweighs the cost. In the alternate world, 50 million years of co-evolving with the specific predation pressure of the nocturnal theropods has pushed some small mammal lineages toward a different solution. The theropod predators that hunt the alternate world's small mammals at night are, as we established, extraordinarily capable, better at detecting and tracking small nocturnal prey than any predator in our world's current fauna. Against this level of predation pressure, individual small mammals are highly vulnerable. But groups of small mammals, groups that maintain complex communication, that share alarm signals, that coordinate their movements to confuse and overwhelm the detection capability of pursuing predators, are significantly more likely to survive any given night. This group advantage has been driving social complexity in some small mammal lineages for 50 million years. The most social alternate world small mammals live in extended family groups of 10 to 30 individuals, with complex dominance hierarchies, long-term pair bonds, and extended juvenile dependency that allows the young to learn behavioral repertoires from adults. They maintain contact in the dark through a rich repertoire of ultrasonic calls, short, specific, individually recognizable vocalizations that serve the same social function that facial expressions and gestures serve in diurnal social animals. They know each other. They maintain relationships over years. They have, in the functional sense, a social world as complex as anything our own small mammals possess. None of this is particularly surprising from the standpoint of evolutionary theory. Given enough time and the right selection pressures, social complexity will emerge in any lineage capable of benefiting from it. What is surprising? What makes the alternate world's small mammals genuinely unexpected is a behavior that has appeared in at least 2 independent lineages in the last 5 to 10 million years of alternate time. They cache food. This is not unusual. Many small mammals in our world cache food, storing surplus for later use, but the alternate small mammals do something beyond simple caching. They cache specific foods in specific locations and remember the locations individually, updating their spatial memory as cached food is consumed or spoiled. This is a cognitively demanding task. It requires maintaining a mental map not just of the landscape, but of the landscape's current resource state, updated continuously from memory. And some lineages have extended this into a form of planning. In seasons of abundance, they cache more food than they need in the immediate term, in quantities that correspond to the expected duration of the coming lean period. Is this planning? It is, at minimum, the behavioral signature of something like planning, preparing for a future state that is not yet present. In our world, planning, the ability to act in the present based on a model of the future, is considered one of the hallmarks of advanced cognition. The alternate world's small mammals are doing it, after 50 million years of selection pressure in an environment where failing to prepare for winter means dying in winter. This brings us to a point that is easy to miss in the large-scale narrative of the alternate world. The intelligence that is most likely to eventually produce something genuinely transformative in the alternate world might not come from the cognitives, the troodontid descendants we have been following. It might come from the small mammals. Not in the alternate present. They are still too small, their brains too constrained by their body size economics to reach the absolute levels of cognitive complexity that the cognitives have achieved. But in another 10 million years, or 20, the arms race dynamic between the nocturnal mammal lineages and their theropod predators might push the mammals into a cognitive space that the cognitives have not reached from their very different starting point. This is speculative. It is the thought experiment extending further than the evidence strictly supports, but it is not unreasonable. The cognitive complexity of small mammals in our world, which never had the full 50 million year push of the alternate arms race, has surprised us repeatedly, from the tool-using octopus to the problem-solving crow to the empathetic rat. What might the alternate world's 50 million year refined small mammals eventually become? The answer, like so many of the alternate world's answers, lives in the future we cannot see. The small mammals of the alternate present are going about their night, under the roots of a large alternate forest tree in a burrow that the family group has extended and modified over several generations. A female with 3 juveniles is grooming one of them while the other 2 sleep in a huddle of warm fur. The grooming is efficient and methodical. She is processing the juvenile's coat from nose to tail with the automatic attention that comes from years of practice. But she is also communicating. Her ultrasonic vocalizations during the grooming form a pattern that the juvenile will learn to produce itself, a contact call that marks this family group as distinct from the neighboring groups that share this section of forest. The juvenile being groomed will carry that call for the rest of its life, will produce it when it is separated from the group, will recognize it when it is produced by its siblings and mother, will use it eventually to maintain contact with its own offspring. The call is both individual and inherited. Individual in the sense that no two animals produce it in exactly the same way. Inherited in the sense that the pattern is passed from mother to offspring through the same vocal learning mechanism we identified in the cognitives. The small mammals of the alternate world have learned to learn their calls. That is not nothing. The night in the small mammal world is long and full and dangerous and companionable. It is full of the sounds that are below and above our hearing range, the chemical signals that our noses cannot pass, the social exchanges that our eyes cannot follow in the dark. It is a world we share our planet with and have always been unable to fully enter. In the alternate world, it is richer than it is in ours, and older, and more elaborately itself. Rest in the thought of it, the small lives running their 50-million-year experiment in the dark spaces between the large ones, patient, complex, alive. Step away from the land for a moment. Step back from the forests and the herds and the slow intelligence building in the alternate world's long afternoon. Come to the coast. In the alternate world's 50th year, 50 million years after the asteroid missed, stand at the edge of an ocean that looks familiar from a distance and increasingly strange up close, and listen to what the sea is doing. The ocean sounds different here, not dramatically different. Water is water, waves are waves, and the physics of the sea have not changed because the asteroid missed a planet 66 million years ago. But the sounds that come from within it are different. Below the surface, in the upper layers where light still penetrates, there are calls. Low, resonant, traveling enormous distances through the water in the way that only certain large marine animals can manage. And they are being answered. In our world, the role of the ocean's great calling creatures, the whales, was filled by the descendants of a small deer-like mammal called Pachycetus, whose descendants gradually returned to the sea over tens of millions of years following the KPG extinction, evolving flippers and flukes and the ability to breathe in an oceanic world. Whales are magnificent. But in the alternate world, there are no large marine mammals. The mammals of the alternate world have stayed small, have stayed terrestrial, have stayed in their nocturnal underbrush niche. The sea's calling giants are something else entirely. The mosasaurs. In our timeline, they were among the largest predators in late Cretaceous oceans, some reaching 17 or 18 meters in length, with skulls the size of small cars, filled with teeth designed to crush and cut and swallow prey that no other predator in their ecosystem could tackle. They were lizards, essentially, large, secondarily aquatic lizards, relatives of modern monitor lizards, that had returned to the sea and evolved into something extraordinary. And at the KPG boundary, every last one of them went extinct. In the alternate world, they didn't, and 50 million years of continued evolution in the world's oceans has produced something that even the late Cretaceous mosasaurs' most devoted admirers would not have predicted: diversity. A radiation of mosasaur forms that fills ecological roles from the surface to the deep, from the tropics to the subarctic, from the small and fast to the enormous and slow. The mosasaur dynasty in the alternate world's ocean is doing what the cetacean dynasty does in ours, occupying every available marine niche with forms shaped precisely for each one. The largest alternate world mosasaur forms have grown beyond the Cretaceous maximum. 50 million years of continued selection for large body size in the open ocean, where large size reduces heat loss, extends diving depth, and enables capture of larger prey, has produced animals that exceed 20 meters in length. These are not dinosaurs in the popular sense. They are not the theropods or sauropods that most people picture. But they are archosaur relatives distantly, and they are part of the same broad dynasty that the alternate world has kept intact. The Mesozoic survivors, the animals that did not need a second chance because they never needed one. Alongside the mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, those animals with long necks and small heads and 4 flipper limbs that look like nothing in the modern ocean, have also been evolving for 50 million additional years. In our world, every plesiosaur went extinct at the KPG boundary, and with them went one of the most distinctive body plans in vertebrate history. In the alternate world, the plesiosaurs have continued, diversified, and in some lineages pushed their already remarkable body plan in directions that the Cretaceous forms only hinted at. The longest-necked alternate-world plesiosaurs have necks that account for more than half their total body length, some reaching 8 or 9 meters of neck alone, attached to a compact body and 4 powerful flippers. They move through the water with a slow, deliberate grace, browsing on schools of fish the way their terrestrial sauropod relatives browse on treetops. The neck has become a feeding instrument of extraordinary reach, allowing them to sweep through dense schools of small fish and capture dozens per lunge without alarming the edges of the school, because the neck approaches so slowly and from such a distance that the fish do not recognize it as a predator until the moment of contact. In the shallower coastal waters, something is happening that deserves its own quiet moment of attention. The ichthyosaurs, dolphin-shaped marine reptiles that had dominated Mesozoic seas since before the dinosaurs were common on land, had been declining in the late Cretaceous, their diversity dropping as mosasaurs rose to fill similar ecological roles. In our timeline, they went extinct about 90 million years ago before the KPG event, possibly outcompeted by the mosasaurs and other marine animals. But a few lineages survived to the KPG boundary. In the alternate world, those surviving lineages have had 50 million years to recover, and recover they have. The ichthyosaurs of the alternate world's 50th year are a diverse group again, not as dominant as they were in the Triassic and Jurassic, but ecologically significant, occupying the fast-pursuit predator niche in ways that make them functionally similar to the dolphins and porpoises of our world. They are not dolphins, they are ichthyosaurs, but they eat the same kinds of fish, by the same kinds of chase strategies, with similar levels of social complexity. Here is a question to hold as you drift. Is there something inevitable about the dolphin body plan? We live in a world where dolphins are the dominant fast-swimming, highly social, cognitively complex marine predators. The ichthyosaurs of the Mesozoic had the same body plan, independently derived. The alternate world's ichthyosaurs are converging on it again, from a different ancestral starting point. Is there something about warm, shallow seas full of fast fish that inevitably produces animals with streamlined bodies, large brains, and complex social structures? Does the ocean, in some sense, always produce dolphins, even when the dolphin is made of reptile? The question matters because cognitive complexity in the ocean is not something we usually associate with reptiles. We associate it with mammals, with dolphins and killer whales and sea otters, but the alternate world suggests that the mammal body plan is not the only path to marine intelligence. Given enough time and the right pressures, a reptile lineage in the ocean can arrive at the same solutions by different means. The alternate ocean at 50 million years is not just a more diverse version of the Cretaceous ocean, it is a more ancient and layered ecosystem, 50 million years deeper than our Cretaceous fossils, 50 million years of accumulated ecological relationships, prey preferences, and hunting strategies. The marine food web is intricately structured in ways that a visiting marine biologist from our world would need decades to unravel. Species that had been generalists in the Cretaceous have become specialists. Specialists have evolved counter-adaptations in their prey. Prey have evolved counter-adaptations in their own behavior. The whole system has had 50 million years to co-evolve into something rich and complex and quietly beautiful. And there is beauty in it. Standing at the coast of the alternate world's 50th year, watching the long neck of a giant plesiosaur rise from the water and scan the horizon before slowly descending again, you would feel something that our world's oceans still produce. The particular vertigo of standing at the edge of a system so vast and old and alive that the human mind cannot fully contain it. You would feel small. You would feel brief. You would feel, perhaps, grateful. The waves break on the alternate coast with the same sound they break on ours. The salt smell is the same. The seabirds, or things very like seabirds, descendants of the flying theropods, wheel overhead with the same crying calls that seabirds have made since the Cretaceous. The sea is the sea, old and enormous and indifferent. And under its surface, 50 million years of uninterrupted Mesozoic life continues its long, patient work. The light is fading now over the alternate ocean. The water takes on the copper and purple tones of evening, and somewhere out in the deepening blue, something very large surfaces briefly, blows out a breath of warm mist, and descends again. You do not see it clearly. You just see the displaced water, the small wave that spreads outward from where it was, the brief perturbation in the surface that marks the passage of something ancient and enormous and thoroughly alive. Let your eyes close. Let the sound of the waves come in slowly, rhythmically, like breathing. The ocean has been making this sound for 4 billion years. It will be making it long after every creature we have imagined tonight has left its last bones in the mud. In that permanence there is comfort. In that continuity there is peace. The ocean breathes. The shore breathes. You breathe. Let the rhythms synchronize, and let the alternate world's ocean carry you gently towards sleep on the sound of waves that have never known our shore. If you're drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. There is something deeply strange about imagining dinosaurs in snow. We have been trained by decades of museum dioramas and movie sequences to picture dinosaurs in jungle heat, in swamp steam, in the baking late afternoon light of an endless prehistoric summer. But dinosaurs had already broken out of that thermal niche long before the asteroid almost came. They had already proven, in the actual fossil record of our world, that they could survive cold, dark, polar winters. And in the alternate world, 60 million years after the asteroid missed, what they have done with that capability is extraordinary. In the actual Cretaceous, dinosaurs lived above the Arctic Circle. We have the bones to prove it. In what is now northern Alaska, in rocks deposited within the Arctic zone where winters would have brought months of near-total darkness and temperatures well below freezing, paleontologists have found a diverse and abundant dinosaur fauna. Not just a few desperate survivors clinging to the margins of a livable zone, a full, rich ecosystem of predators and prey, large and small, adapted to conditions that, by the standards of our museum imagination, should have been impossible for them. How did they do it? The same way every animal does it. They were built for it, by evolution, over many generations of selection pressure. The Arctic dinosaurs of the actual Cretaceous were not the same animals as their southern relatives. They were adapted, physiologically, behaviorally, to the specific demands of polar existence. They likely had higher base metabolic rates. They likely had more insulating feathers or other integumentary structures. They likely migrated seasonally, following the food, moving between lower latitudes in winter and the rich Arctic summers where the sun never set and plant life exploded into extraordinary productivity. In the alternate world, 60 million years after those Arctic dinosaurs were given the gift of an uninterrupted future, the polar lineages have had 60 million years to deepen that adaptation, and they have become something astonishing. The polar dinosaurs of the alternate 60 million year world are not recognizable in most respects as the animals they descended from. The pressures of the polar environment, extreme seasonal variation in temperature and light, the metabolic demands of maintaining body temperature through months of cold and darkness, the behavioral complexity required to navigate a world where food availability varies by orders of magnitude between summer and winter, have been reformatting those ancestral body plans for 60 million years. What has emerged is something unique. The most successful polar lineage in the alternate world's 60 million year mark is descended from the ornithopod hadrosaurs, but it no longer much resembles its ancestors. It has become stockier and more compact, reducing the surface area to volume ratio that loses heat in cold environments, the same principle that makes polar bears blockier than their tropical bear relatives. Its feather-analogous integument has become thick and layered, more like the fur of a muskox than the plumage of a bird. Its hands, always somewhat dexterous in the hadrosaur line, have become more fully functional, used not just for balance and occasional grasping, but for digging through snow to reach vegetation cached below the winter surface. The digging behavior is learned. Young animals learn it from adults, not from instinct. A generation raised without access to experienced adults loses the most efficient digging strategies and has to rediscover them imperfectly. This is cultural transmission, the passing of adaptive knowledge through social learning across generations, and it is one of the markers of cognitive complexity that links the polar hadrosaurs of the alternate world to the growing intelligence question we explored earlier. But the most remarkable thing about the polar hadrosaurs is not their physiology or even their cultural learning, it is their social structure. In the extreme resource variability of the polar environment, where summer brings enough food that dozens of individuals can eat their fill simultaneously, and winter brings conditions where resources must be shared strategically to ensure the group's survival, the most cognitively complex and socially sophisticated individuals consistently outperform their less sophisticated groupmates. Evolution in this environment selects heavily for social intelligence. The polar hadrosaur groups in the alternate world's 60 million year mark are organized into extended family units with clear long-term relationship histories. Older individuals, and some lived to 40 or 50 years now, longer than their Cretaceous ancestors who rarely exceeded 30, function as knowledge repositories, their memories of past winters and past food sources being genuinely useful to the group's survival. Young animals remain with their birth groups for years, learning from elders before gradually establishing independence. Some individuals never fully establish independence, remaining in the group and contributing to collective foraging and childcare rather than reproducing independently. Does this sound familiar? It should. Extended family groups with long-term relationships, elderly knowledge repositories, extended juvenile dependency, and individuals who forego reproduction to contribute to group success. These are the organizational features of the most cognitively complex social mammals in our world. Elephants, killer whales, primates. The features are not accidental. They are the output of the same evolutionary process, operating on different raw material, dinosaur anatomy, and dinosaur nervous systems, and producing convergent solutions to the same fundamental problem. How do you survive a highly variable and cognitively demanding environment? The alternate world's polar regions are not just full of these extraordinary hadrosaurs. The predator lineage has also been shaped by the cold. The polar theropods are leaner and faster than their southern cousins, better insulated but more lightly built, because in the sparse winter landscape, mobility is the primary survival strategy. They hunt individually or in small pairs rather than the larger groups that their tropical relatives favor. They have excellent memories for topography, the ability to navigate back to remembered locations over enormous distances, because the polar landscape changes dramatically between summer and winter, and an animal that can fix a mental map of summer food locations and return to them in winter has a survival advantage over one that cannot. Here is something to consider in the quiet. Memory and navigation are demanding cognitive tasks. They require not just storage capacity but organizational capacity, the ability to encode information in a retrievable form, to cross-reference spatial memories with temporal information, where the food was last winter, where it might be this winter given where it has moved, to update stored information with new experience. These demands may not seem glamorous compared to the narrative of intelligence that we usually tell, the story of tool use and language and abstract thought, but they are real cognitive demands and they have real consequences for neural evolution. The polar theropods of the alternate world's 60 million year mark have larger brain cases than their Cretaceous ancestors. Not dramatically larger, the change is measurable in ratios, not in gross size differences that would be obvious to a casual observer. But the trend is consistent. The most complex environments, the ones that demand the most behavioral flexibility and the richest memory, are producing the largest brains, not in one lineage, in several, independently. The world is being shaped by intelligence, and intelligence is being shaped by the world. Above the Arctic Circle, in the alternate world, the summer sky is sometimes light all night. In those white nights, when the sun circles the horizon without setting and the temperature is just barely cool enough to be comfortable, the polar dinosaurs are at their most active. The hadrosaur family groups move through the landscape in a loose formation that communicates constant information, the positions of bodies, the direction of heads, the small sounds that pass between individuals in a frequency range just above the hearing threshold of the larger predators. They are talking, in their way, they are talking all the time. What are they saying? We don't know. We can only observe the behavior that results from the communication and infer that information is being shared. Information about direction, about pace, about the location of water under the snow, about the presence of something that needs to be avoided. The polar night is full of their conversations, carried on the wind over a landscape that to human eyes would look empty and severe, but that to them is as legible as a city map. The alternate winter comes. The polar dinosaurs settle into their winter strategies, some migrating south, some staying to forage under the snow, all managing resources with a care and precision that their Cretaceous ancestors would not have been capable of. The cold makes them careful, the darkness makes them deliberate. The long seasonal pulse of abundance and scarcity makes them, in the deepest sense of the word, thoughtful. Let the winter settle around you too. Let the alternate polar night be quiet. The stars above the Arctic in this imagined world are the same stars, the same ancient light, crossing the same distances, touching the same upturned faces. On the ground below, a polar hadrosaur family group has settled into the shallow warmth of a snowbank, the adults positioned around the periphery and the young tucked into the center, breathing slowly in the cold. They are not asleep exactly. No large animal in the Arctic can afford to sleep deeply, but they are resting. They are quiet. They are together. Let yourself rest with them. Let the alternate polar night hold you. Let the snow fall softly on a world you will never visit except in the gentle territory between waking and sleep. There is something about rivers that persists. Mountains erode, seas shift, forests burn and regrow and burn again. But rivers, the actual courses of actual rivers, remember the landscape they were carved by for an extraordinarily long time. Some modern rivers follow paths first established by the drainage patterns of ancient mountains, long since eroded to nothing. The river exists in the present, full of present water and present life, but it carries in its course the memory of a landscape that no longer exists in any other form. In the alternate world's 60 million year mark, 6 million years before the alternate present, the rivers are old. Not just old in the sense that water has been flowing in them for a long time, but old in the sense that the ecosystems within them and along their banks have been elaborating their relationships for 60 million uninterrupted years. The freshwater ecosystems of the alternate world are, if anything, more distinctive from our own than the terrestrial ones because freshwater habitats are more isolated. Rivers and lakes are islands in the landscape, connected to each other by the corridors of the waterways themselves, but bounded by the land on all sides. And isolation over 60 million years produces extraordinary differentiation. Stand at the edge of one of the alternate world's large rivers at the 60 million year mark. It is a tropical river, broad and slow-moving in its lower reaches, running brown with suspended sediment and the organic matter that the surrounding forest has been contributing to it for longer than any human mind can easily hold. The water is warm. The surface has that particular quality of tropical rivers in our world, a metallic sheen in the right light, a sense of depth and opacity, a surface that conceals rather than reveals the life below it. The life below it is extraordinary. Freshwater fish in the alternate world have had 60 million additional years to diversify without the KPG extinction resetting the marine food web and indirectly reshaping freshwater systems through the changes it drove in terrestrial and coastal ecosystems. The fish fauna of the alternate world's major rivers is not larger in body size than our own river fish. The physics of freshwater constrain maximum body size in ways that the ocean does not, but it is larger in diversity and more elaborately structured in the ecological roles it fills. The dominant large fish of the alternate world's tropical rivers are descendants of the ray-finned fish that were already diverse in the Cretaceous, not the specific species which have evolved enormously, but the broader lineages. There are large, slow-moving predators that occupy the same ecological space as our world's Nile perch or arapaima, ambush predators using camouflage and patience rather than speed. There are fast pursuit predators, sleek and capable in the current, hunting the abundant schools of smaller fish that form the middle trophic levels of the river food web. And there are the filter feeders, large-bodied, toothless, filtering the water for the microscopic organisms that the river's productivity generates in enormous quantities. But the most interesting large animals in the alternate world's rivers are not fish. They are the crocodilians. In our world, crocodilians are an ancient lineage that survived the KPG extinction and has been living in the same basic body plan for 80 million years. They are, in the technical sense, living fossils. Not unchanged, but changed less dramatically than most of their peers. In the alternate world, the crocodilians have had 66 million more years to diversify, and the result is a radiation that goes well beyond anything our world's crocodilians achieved even in their Mesozoic peak. There are alternate world crocodilians that are 10 meters long, the largest freshwater predators in a world where whale-sized marine mosasaurs have not yet colonized rivers. There are slender snouted forms specialized for fish, with jaws that close with a speed and precision that surpasses any modern crocodilian. There are armored forms that have developed secondary plating over their skulls and flanks, armor that evolved presumably in response to the predation of their own young by other large predators. And there are small crocodilians, some as small as a large lizard, that have occupied the ecological niche of large aquatic insectivores, hunting the abundant aquatic insects of the alternate rivers from the riverbanks and surface vegetation. The rivers are also important to the terrestrial dinosaurs in ways that go beyond simple drinking. The floodplains of the alternate world's large rivers are the most productive terrestrial habitats on the planet. Annually flooded, annually renewed with the mineral-rich sediment that the floods carry from upstream, they produce vegetation in quantities that support the highest densities of large herbivorous dinosaurs found anywhere. The hadrosaur herds of the tropical floodplains can number in the hundreds of thousands of individuals, moving across the plain in the complex coordinated patterns that large herds develop over generations. These herds are studied by a particular set of large theropods that have become floodplain specialists. Not the largest theropods. The floodplain habitat is too open for the ambush-based hunting strategies that the largest theropods prefer. These are medium-large pursuit predators, long-legged and capable of sustained running across the flat terrain of the plain, hunting in coordinated groups that use the openness of the habitat to coordinate strategies impossible in the forest. They drive herds of hadrosaurs in specific directions, cutting off escape routes, separating vulnerable individuals from the group's protective mass. Here is something about floodplain habitats that matters for the alternate world's intelligent story. They are annually disrupted. Every year, the rains come and the rivers rise and the floodplain becomes briefly a shallow sea. The vegetation dies back. The hadrosaur herds retreat to higher ground. The predators follow them. And then the water recedes and the cycle begins again, a predictable, structured annual disruption that every animal living on the floodplain must anticipate and respond to. Anticipating the flood cycle, knowing when the rains are coming, knowing which routes lead to higher ground, knowing where the last pockets of vegetation will survive the longest as the water rises, is a cognitively demanding task. And in the alternate world's floodplains, the animals that perform this task best have the most offspring. The selection pressure for predictive cognition on the alternate world's floodplains is high, sustained, and has been operating for 60 million years. The floodplain hadrosaurs show the effects. Their crests, those resonating chambers that their ancestors in the Cretaceous used for long-distance vocalizations, have elaborated into extraordinarily complex structures capable of producing highly nuanced acoustic signals. The calls of floodplain hadrosaur groups carry specific information about flood stage, movement direction, and the location of resources in ways that the simple alarm calls and contact calls of their forest-dwelling relatives do not. They are, by the 60 million year mark, communicating about the environment in ways that approach a primitive symbolic system. They are not quite there, not quite using vocalizations to refer to things that are not immediately present, not quite saying the river has risen to the third tree, move north now, in any sense that we would recognize as language. But they are using consistent signals in consistent contexts in ways that other group members respond to appropriately, and those signals are learned rather than instinctive, and they carry more information than any simple alarm call. The gradient continues. 60 million years in, on the alternate world's floodplains, the gradient continues. The rivers at night are a different world. In the dark, the water reflects nothing. The alternate sky, whether cloudy or clear, provides less illumination than the rivers in the alternate world hold in their murky depths. But the night river is full of sound. The calls of the aquatic insects that constitute the base of the river food web. The splash of fish jumping at the surface. The slow, heavy movement of a large crocodilian entering the water from the bank, its armored body displacing a small wave that spreads across the river and rocks the floating vegetation on the far shore. And somewhere in the darkness, on a sandbar in the river's middle, a hadrosaur has waded in to drink and is standing still in the shallow water, its crest just visible above the surface, not quite ready to go back to the bank and the relative safety of the herd. There is something peaceful about its stillness. The enormous animal in the dark water, drinking slowly, surrounded by the sound of the river. Its crest is extended, picking up the vibrations in the water that the river's currents produce. It is reading the river the way an animal reads its environment, with its whole body, with the full attention of a creature that has no option but to be present. The river runs, the water moves. Everything that the river touches, it carries a little further downstream. The sediment from the eroding mountains, the fallen leaves from the forest banks, the chemical traces of the animals that have drunk from it, waded in it, died in it, been born in it. The river is the memory of the landscape, moving slowly toward the sea, carrying everything the landscape has ever known. Let the river carry you. Let its slow current be the current of sleep, moving you gently from here towards somewhere quieter. The alternate world's river has been running for 60 million years without stopping. One more night is not long. One more night is nothing at all in the long patience of a river. The Earth does not stop moving just because the dinosaurs continue. Plate tectonics operates on timescales that dwarf even the 66 million year span we have been exploring, and in the alternate world's 75th year, 3/4 of the way to our imagined present, the face of the planet has changed in ways that would take a long breath to absorb. The world looks different, not alien, not unrecognizable. The same ocean basins are roughly in the same places, the same broad continental arrangements are in place. But the details have shifted, and in those details are worlds within worlds, each shaped by the particular geography of its moment. The Himalayas are here. India, that wandering island continent that spent most of the Mesozoic moving northward across the ancient Tethys Sea, has by the alternate 75 million year mark collided fully with the Asian landmass and raised the highest mountain range in this world just as it raised the highest mountain range in ours. The timing is the same, plate tectonics doesn't care which creatures are watching, and the consequence for climate is the same. A vast uplift of rock that redirects the monsoon, creates rain shadows, and establishes the high-altitude world of the Tibetan Plateau. In our world, the Himalayan uplift drove the evolution of cold-adapted large mammals, the yak, the snow leopard, the bar-headed goose that migrates over the peaks at altitudes that would incapacitate most other animals. In the alternate world, the Himalayan fauna is dinosaurian. The cold-adapted hadrosaur lineages from the polar regions have found something that suits them in the high altitudes. Seasonal rhythms similar to polar rhythms, extreme resource variability, the metabolic demands of cold, thin air. They have colonized the high Himalayas and begun, in the last few million years, adapting to them specifically. The high-altitude dinosaurs of the alternate Himalayas are compact, heavily insulated, and equipped with respiratory systems that can extract oxygen from air that is too thin for most of their lowland relatives. This is a newly evolved adaptation. The last few million years of colonizing high altitude have been a period of intense selection pressure. The animals at high altitude who are most effective at processing thin air have the most offspring, and those offspring carry the same advantages, amplified generation by generation. Evolution moving fast, the way it always moves when the pressure is intense. In the valleys below the Himalayan peaks, something else is happening. The rivers that flow down from the new mountains carry extraordinary quantities of sediment, enriching the floodplains below with the mineral wealth of ground-up rock from the world's highest elevations. These floodplains are extraordinarily fertile, the same fertility that has made the Ganges and Brahmaputra plains among the most productive agricultural land on Earth in our world. In the alternate world, that fertility supports enormous concentrations of plant-eating dinosaurs. This is the alternate world's 75 million year point, and the river plains of the new Himalayan foothills are home to something that has no equivalent in our world. Permanent, stable concentrations of large, herbivorous dinosaurs in numbers that rival the African savannas of our own Pleistocene, but in a setting that dwarfs them in scale and geological freshness. The herds here are vast. The largest ornithopod herds number in the thousands of individuals, moving across the floodplains in loosely coordinated groups that follow the seasonal pulse of the rivers, retreating to higher ground when the monsoon floods the plains, returning when the water recedes and the new growth appears. The predators follow the herds, they always have. The large theropod lineages of the alternate world's subtropical regions have been evolving in constant arms race dialogue with their prey, each advance in predator capability driving an advance in prey defense and vice versa. After 75 million years of this dialogue, both sides have arrived at levels of complexity that the Cretaceous only hinted at. The predatory theropods here are not like Tyrannosaurus. They are faster, built for pursuit as much as for power, with longer legs and lighter bodies that sacrifice some of the bone-crushing capability of the Cretaceous giants in favor of endurance hunting. Some hunt alone. Some hunt in coordinated groups of 2 to 4 individuals, using the landscape strategically, positioning themselves on ridges or at river crossings to intercept prey, communicating intentions through the visual signaling that is now 75 million years deep in the alternate world, extraordinarily elaborate. There is a specific hunting strategy observed in the alternate world's theropod groups that has no precise parallel in our world's predators: the relay. Two individuals position themselves at different points along a prey animal's likely escape route, and one drives the prey toward the other. This requires not just spatial coordination, but temporal coordination, a shared understanding of the prey's likely behavior, and a division of labor based on that shared understanding. It is not certain that this constitutes planning in the full cognitive sense, but it is a behavior that requires holding a model of the future in mind and acting in the present based on that model. The alternate world's 75 million year mark is also a point of interesting tectonic consequence for the Western Hemisphere. North and South America have been connected for several million years by the equivalent of our Isthmus of Panama, a land bridge that formed somewhat earlier in the alternate world than in ours, due to slight differences in plate configuration driven by the absence of the KPG event's disruption to sea levels. With this connection, there has been an exchange of fauna between the northern and southern continents, a great biotic interchange, but one occurring between dinosaurian faunas rather than the mammalian faunas that carried out the same exchange in our world. Southern sauropod lineages moved north, northern theropod lineages moved south. The results, playing out over millions of years, have been a mixing and competition that has reshaped the fauna of both continents in ways that neither continent's fauna would have predicted. Some southern lineages thrived in the north, some northern lineages thrived in the south. Some combinations produced hybrid ecological situations, a large southern sauropod occupying the same habitat as a northern hadrosaur herd for the first time, that required new adaptations on both sides. This is the power of geography in the alternate world. Mountains rise and redirect rivers and climate. Land bridges form and allow faunas to meet for the first time. Seas shift and create new coastlines that host new species. None of this is driven by the asteroid having missed. The geology of the planet proceeds regardless. But the biological consequences of the geological changes are different because the players are different. In our world, the mammals crossing the Isthmus of Panama were already mammals. In the alternate world, they are dinosaurs. Same geography, completely different players, completely different game. Here is something to notice as you hold all of this. The alternate world at 75 million years is not just a version of our world with dinosaurs substituted for mammals. It is a genuinely different world, structured by genuinely different animals in genuinely different ways, with genuinely different ecosystems and genuinely different ecological relationships. It is not our world minus the mammals. It is a new world that happens to share a planet with our world, separated only by the matter of a single rock and 30 seconds of celestial timing. The mountains of the alternate world are quiet in the evening. Above the tree line, where the air is thin and the wind constant, a group of compact, heavily feathered ornithopods stands motionless on a ridge, their bodies turned to catch the last warmth of the setting sun. They have been climbing since morning. They are not cold. They have never been cold in any meaningful sense because their biology takes care of that now, as automatically and efficiently as any endotherm. They are simply resting, using the last light, storing warmth for the night ahead. Far below in the valley, a river is glittering silver in the late light. Along its banks, the floodplain spreads flat and green for miles in each direction, dotted with the small shapes of hadrosaur groups settling for the evening and the larger, slower shapes of a titanosaur family group that has spent the day moving from one section of the plain to another, eating continuously, as titanosaurs do. In the distance, a large theropod is visible on a ridge, not hunting now, just standing, watching, the predator's perpetual vigilance woven into its posture even at rest. The world at 75 million years is immense and detailed and alive in every direction you look. There is no empty space. Every niche is occupied. Every ecological role has been found and filled by something that has had the luxury of millions of years to find it. The world has been fully inhabited in a way that our present world, thinned by extinctions and simplified by human activity, has largely stopped being. Rest in that fullness. Let the detail of it soften as the light goes. Let the shapes on the river plain become general rather than specific. Just the living world, breathing in its sleep, patient and full. You are drifting now. Let yourself drift. The story will find you again when you surface, whether that is in a minute or an hour or the morning. It will be here. It is not going anywhere. We are approaching the end of our journey through the alternate world, not the end of the world itself, that will continue for billions of years, indifferent to whether anyone is watching, but the end of the specific story we are telling tonight. We are approaching the alternate world's present moment, the point that corresponds to our own today, and before we arrive there, we need to check back in with the question we left hanging in the earlier chapters, like a question left answered midway. What has happened to the minds? 80 million years. 80 million years since the asteroid missed, and the troodontid lineage has had all of that time to build on what was already, by the Cretaceous standard, a promising cognitive foundation. We checked in at 45 million years and found vocal learning, tool use at the edge of the definition, and complex social structure. Now we are checking in again, another 35 million years later, and the question is, where has the gradient gone? The answer requires care. It requires resisting the temptation to tell a triumphalist story, the story of inevitable progress, of brains getting bigger and bigger until something humanoid sits down to write the history of its world. That story is seductive because it mirrors our own evolutionary narrative, but evolution does not have a direction. It does not move toward complexity for its own sake. It moves toward whatever works, and what works depends entirely on what the environment is selecting for at any given moment. What the environment has been selecting for in the troodontid lineage over 80 million years of alternate history is a bundle of capabilities that cluster together in the same way that cognitive capabilities cluster together in the most complex animals we know. Social intelligence, memory, flexibility, the ability to learn from others, the ability to learn from experience, the ability to solve problems that evolution has not specifically prepared solutions for. These capabilities are expensive. They require large, metabolically costly brains, and they persist only when the environment makes them pay. In the ecological niche that the alternate world's troodontid descendants occupy, they pay. The alternate world's troodontid descendants, we might call them the cognitives, though they have no name for themselves, are medium-sized animals. They have not grown large in the way that some of their theropod relatives have. They have stayed in the 15 to 30 kilogram range, the range that balances the advantages of small size, energy efficiency, the ability to exploit diverse food sources, rapid reproduction, with the advantages of large enough brain size to support the neural complexity they have been accumulating. They look, at first glance, like very sophisticated, very large-brained birds, because the feathering that the theropod lineage has been developing for 250 million years is now full and complex and individual in ways that our birds only hint at. Their hands are extraordinary, 3 fingers, as in many theropods, but the proportions have shifted over 80 million years towards something that allows finer manipulation. They can grasp. They can manipulate with individual fingers rather than just with the whole hand. They cannot quite do the precision grip, the pad-to-pad contact between thumb and finger that allows the extraordinary dexterity of primate hands, because their first finger is not a true thumb. But they have a semi-precision grip that is enormously useful, that allows them to handle objects, rotate them, examine them from multiple angles. And they do examine objects. This is, perhaps, the most remarkable thing about the alternate world's cognitives at 80 million years. They look at things. Not just to assess whether something is food or predator or mate, that is what every animal does, but they look at things with an interest that goes beyond immediate utility. They pick up objects they have never encountered and manipulate them until they understand in some functional sense how the object works. They are curious, and curiosity, in the absence of specific survival pressure, is the behavioral signature of a mind that has grown beyond its original task. Here is an unknown fact that most accounts of this kind of thought experiment miss. The cognitive evolution we are imagining in the alternate world does not require a single dramatic leap. It requires the slow accumulation of small improvements over enormous time spans, each one so minor that no individual generation would notice the change. The cognitive gap between the troodontids of the Cretaceous And the cognitives of the alternate 80 million year world is the product of perhaps 20 to 30 million generations of very, very small selection differentials. Just enough advantage in each generation to leave slightly more offspring. Just enough brain, just enough memory, just enough flexibility. And over millions of generations, those slight advantages compound into something qualitatively different. The cognitives use tools, not occasionally, not in specific learned contexts, but routinely as a general strategy for solving physical problems. The tools are found objects, stones, sticks, shells, not manufactured objects. They have not yet crossed into the territory of making tools rather than using them, but found object tool use, deployed flexibly across a wide variety of tasks, is already in itself a cognitive achievement that only a handful of species in our world have ever managed. Crows, chimpanzees, otters, humans, the list is short. They live in stable social groups with complex hierarchies that are maintained not by raw physical dominance, though physical capability matters, but by coalition formation, alliance politics, and the social intelligence to navigate a community of 30 to 50 individuals who all know each other well and have long memories for social events. Being good at the social game requires holding a detailed model of many other individuals in your mind simultaneously, knowing who is allied with whom, who has a grudge against whom, who is likely to support or oppose you in a given situation. This is exactly the cognitive task that researchers believe drove the expansion of the primate brain. And here is the micro hook to carry into the next part of the story. The cognitives communicate, not just in calls, in structured sequences of calls, with elements that can be recombined in different orders to produce different meanings. The number of distinct elements in their vocal repertoire has been growing very slowly, very gradually, but measurably over the 80 million year alternate timeline, and the combinations they use are not random. The same combinations appear reliably in the same contexts across individuals and across groups that have never been in contact, suggesting not just learned behavior but something more structured, rules about how elements can be combined. Is this language? Probably not by the strict definition. There is no syntax in the linguistic sense. There is no reference to absent objects or past events or hypothetical futures. But it is on a spectrum that leads, given enough time and enough pressure, toward language. And the alternate world has more time. It always has more time. We are not going to make the story too neat. We are not going to say, and then the cognitives developed language and built cities and wrote the history of their world. That would be too easy, too human-shaped, too comfortable. The alternate world does not mirror our story. It tells its own story in its own time, in its own way. And we do not know how that story ends, or whether it ends at all in anything like a familiar direction. But we know that 80 million years after the asteroid missed, there are animals on this planet that look at the world and think about it, that have cultures, learned behaviors transmitted between generations, that have relationships that persist over decades, that use tools that communicate in structured ways, that are curious in ways that exceed the demands of immediate survival. They are not us, but they are something the world of our timeline never got to produce. Let that land gently. Let the weight of it settle. A line of cognitive evolution, building patiently in the alternate world for 80 million years, arriving at a threshold that may or may not lead to something we would recognize as a mind. The question is not answered. The question may never be answered, but the fact that it can be asked is itself something. The evening of the alternate world's 80 million year mark is quiet. The cognitives in their forest are settling into their sleeping arrangements. A loose communal group on a series of high branches and rocky ledges, the adults positioned to maintain awareness of the surroundings while the young sleep deeper and more completely. There are sounds that pass between them in the near dark, short, soft, structured, contact calls, the equivalent of a last few words before sleep. Let those sounds be the sound of this chapter ending. Let them fade into the general quiet of the alternate forest. The story has more to tell, but your body needs rest, and the best parts of a story are sometimes the ones that wait until morning. Before we climb back to the scale of the cognitives and the sauropod kingdoms, let us spend a chapter at a different scale entirely. Let us go small. Let us go to the scale of things that most visitors to the alternate world would pass without noticing: the insects, the spiders, the small reptiles, the fungi, the soil organisms, and ask what 66 million additional years of evolution has done to the world beneath notice. Insects first, because insects are, by any measure of species count or ecological importance or sheer biomass, the most significant group of animals on this planet in any version of its history. In our world, insect diversity was dramatically reshaped by the KPG extinction. Not as severely as non-avian dinosaur diversity, but significantly. Lineages were reduced. The plant communities that insects depended on were disrupted, and the disruption of the plant communities disrupted the insects that fed on them, and the insects that fed on those insects, and so on up the ecological chain. The insect world of the early Paleocene was a simplified version of the Cretaceous insect world, rebuilding from reduced diversity just as the plant world was rebuilding. In the alternate world, no such rebuilding was needed. The insect communities of the late Cretaceous continued uninterrupted into the alternate Paleocene and the alternate Eocene and all the alternate epochs that follow without names, because there was no extinction to mark the boundary. And those insect communities, building on their already extraordinary late Cretaceous diversity, have had 66 million years to continue in the direction they were heading. The direction they were heading was already toward extreme diversity. The late Cretaceous saw extraordinary insect diversification linked to the coevolution with flowering plants. Pollinating insects, the bees and wasps and flies and beetles that carried pollen between flowers, were already diverse and ecologically important. The herbivorous insects, the caterpillars and aphids and grasshoppers and beetles that fed on plant tissue, were already filling every available niche in the vegetational architecture. The predatory insects and the parasitic insects and the decomposing insects were already complex and numerous. In the alternate world, 66 million more years of this same dynamic has produced insect diversity that exceeds our world's by an amount that would be difficult to even estimate. Here is a number to sit with. Our world contains approximately 1 million described insect species. Estimates of total insect diversity, including undescribed species, range from 2 million to 30 million. The alternate world, with 66 million more years of uninterrupted insect evolution, might contain 2 to 3 times this diversity, 3 to 90 million insect species. Numbers that require more information than we have to estimate precisely, but numbers that are, in any scenario, staggeringly large. What does that mean for the alternate world's ecosystems? It means, first, more complete pollination networks. Every flowering plant in the alternate world has been co-evolving with its pollinators for 66 million more years, producing more specific, more efficient, more reliable pollination relationships. The flowers of the alternate world are more elaborate, more precisely designed for the specific insects that visit them, more dependent on those specific insects, and more rewarding to them. The relationship between flower and pollinator in the alternate world is more highly evolved, more co-adapted, more mutually specific than anything in our world's plant-pollinator networks. Second, it means more complete decomposition networks. The organisms that break down dead matter, the fungi, the bacteria, the decomposing insects, are more diverse in the alternate world and more completely fill the decomposition niche at every scale. Dead wood is processed faster. Dead leaves are consumed more efficiently. The nutrients locked in the bodies of dead animals are returned to the soil more quickly and more completely. The alternate world's nutrient cycling is, in consequence, faster and more efficient than our own. The forests are more productive per unit area because more of the matter that dies in them is returned to circulation rather than being lost to imperfect decomposition. Third, and perhaps most interesting, it means that the food webs of the alternate world are more intricate at the base. The insect world of the alternate present is a complex system of species interacting through predation and parasitism and competition and mutualism, with far more connections and far more species per square meter than anything our insect world achieves. The small birds and flying theropods that feed on these insects are not just eating insects generically, they are navigating a complex web of specific prey with specific behaviors and specific chemical defenses and specific seasonal availabilities. Hunting insects in the alternate world's forest is a cognitively demanding task. This cognitive demand has, over 66 million years, driven the evolution of insect hunting specialists, both among the dinosaurian lineages and among the alternate world's other small insectivores. that are themselves extraordinarily sophisticated. Small theropods that specialize in a few specific insect lineages have developed sensory systems tuned to those specific prey. Their eyes detect the specific wavelengths that those prey insects reflect most strongly. Their hearing is calibrated to the specific frequencies produced by those prey insects' wing beats. They are, in their particular ecological role, perfect, shaped by millions of years of hunting the same prey type into an almost ineffably precise predatory machine. The spiders deserve a moment of attention. Spiders in our world are already extraordinarily diverse, roughly 45,000 described species, with an unknown number still undescribed. They are among the most effective predators of insects in any ecosystem, and their webs and ambush strategies have been evolving in dialogue with the insects they capture for over 300 million years. In the alternate world, that dialogue has continued for 66 million additional years without interruption. The alternate world spiders have produced web architectures that no spider in our world has invented. Not the same basic geometries repeated and refined, but genuinely new forms, new organizational principles for capturing prey, new structural strategies for maintaining webs in the specific wind and humidity conditions of the alternate forests, new chemical compositions for the silk that produce different mechanical properties. Some alternate world spider lineages have web structures of extraordinary complexity, with multiple chambers and passages and features that serve functions we would need years to fully understand. And the silk itself, that extraordinary material that spiders produce through spinnerets at the tip of their abdomens, has diversified into forms not seen in our world. Spider silk is already, by the standards of materials science, one of the most impressive biological materials in existence. Stronger per unit weight than steel, more extensible than nylon, biodegradable, and produced at ambient temperature from the spider's own body. In 66 million more years of evolution, spider silk in the alternate world has diversified into at least a dozen distinct types, each with different mechanical properties, each produced by different spinnerets, each used for different purposes. There is something deeply calming about the image of a spider at its web, even for people who find spiders themselves unsettling. The web itself, that structure of extraordinary precision and mathematical elegance built from the spider's own body, designed to do exactly one thing with great efficiency, is a kind of rest for the mind that contemplates it. It is a thing that knows exactly what it is and does it perfectly. In the alternate world, the webs are more varied, more precisely adapted, more elaborate. They cover more of the available surface area of the forest. They are, in the most literal sense, more of the world than they are in ours. Go still smaller. Go to the soil. The soil of the alternate world's mature forests is, as we noted in the forest chapter, extraordinarily deep and complex. But even in what we said there, we understated the case. The actual biological community of the alternate forest floor, the bacteria and archaea and fungi and protists and nematodes and mites and springtails and all the other micro and mesofauna that constitute the actual bulk of the soil food web, is more diverse and more functionally elaborate than anything in our world's soils. The reason is the same reason the alternate world's everything is more complex: more time. Soil communities develop their complexity slowly, over thousands and tens of thousands of years, as the specific organisms find their specific niches in the specific local environment, and as the relationships between those organisms, the mutualism between mycorrhizal fungi and plant roots, the predator-prey dynamics between soil nematodes and bacteria, the competitive hierarchies among different fungal lineages, deepen and become more elaborately structured. The alternate world's old-growth forest soils have had 66 million more years to develop this complexity. The result is soils that cycle nutrients faster, store more carbon, support more plant productivity, and maintain more biological diversity than anything in our current world. They are, in the ecological sense, functioning better, not because the alternate world has been managed more wisely, no one is managing it at all, but because it has been undisturbed for longer. The benchmark of undisturbed complexity is simply higher. This is perhaps the final and quietest lesson of the alternate world's small life. Undisturbance is its own kind of productivity. Not in the economic sense, not in the sense of maximizing any particular output, but in the ecological sense of producing a system of interlocking relationships that supports more life, more diversity, more resilience, The alternate world's great strength is not the cognitive's growing intelligence or the sauropod's spectacular size. It is the deep, structural, 66-million-year-oldness of its ecological relationships. The small things hold the world together, they always have, in ours and in the one that never was, and in every configuration of life that this planet has ever housed. Let the small things settle in your mind like dust settling in still air, light and slow and pervasive, the world beneath notice, doing its patient work, sleep. Now we must ask the hardest question of the night. We have been building this alternate world layer by layer, its forests and oceans and polar kingdoms, its giant sauropods and thinking troodontids, and the extraordinary diversity of forms that 66 million years of uninterrupted evolution has produced. We have been visiting it the way you visit a country before you ask the question that has been waiting since the first chapter. Are we there? Are we in this world? Is there, in the alternate present, a creature that we can point to and say, that is what we would have been? The answer is almost certainly no, and the path to understanding why is one of the most illuminating things the alternate world has to teach us. Our evolutionary line, the line that eventually produced modern humans, is rooted in the primate order, which diversified out of a small mammal ancestor roughly 60 to 65 million years ago in our timeline. Primates existed because the KPG extinction cleared the ecological space that allowed small mammals to diversify rapidly into larger forms, into new ecological niches, into the trees and the grasslands, and eventually into the cognitive complexity that produced our own line. Without that clearing, without that extinction, the primate order as we know it probably does not exist. In the alternate world, the small mammals of the Cretaceous have been evolving for 66 million years, but they have been doing so under the constraint of an occupied world. The dinosaurs never vacated the large body niches. The ornithopods never stopped being the dominant ground-level herbivores. The theropods never stopped being the dominant predators. In those circumstances, the selective pressure that drove mammal diversification in our world, the sudden availability of every ecological niche simultaneously, was never present. What this means is that the mammals of the alternate world are still in our present moment, the small and nocturnal and opportunistic creatures they were in the late Cretaceous. Not exactly the same species, 66 million years of evolution has produced enormous diversity within the small body, nocturnal, insectivore to omnivore range, but still small, still marginal, still living in the spaces between dinosaur feet. Our ancestors in the alternate world are something like sophisticated rats. This is not a tragedy for them, it is a way of being. Rats, in our world, are among the most successful mammals on the planet, cognitively flexible, socially complex by small mammal standards, adaptable to an extraordinary range of environments. The mammals of the alternate world have been doing the rat's work for 66 million years, finding the food that the larger animals miss, exploiting the cracks and corners and nighttime hours that the dominant fauna leaves unoccupied. They are good at it. They are very, very good at it. But they are not building cities. They are not writing histories. They are not listening to this story. There is no version of this story that gets written or told in the alternate world, because there is no creature in the alternate world complex enough to tell it. Or is there? Here is where the story becomes genuinely uncertain and genuinely interesting. We established in the earlier chapters that the alternate world's cognitives, the troodontid descendants, have been building cognitive complexity for 80 million years. We established that they communicate in structured ways, use tools, maintain complex social relationships, and show curiosity that exceeds immediate survival demands. We established that the gradient of their cognitive evolution is still pointing upward, still producing more complex behavior, more flexible response, more structured communication. But 80 million years is not 66 million years. The alternate world's present moment, today, in our version of events, is 66 million years after the asteroid missed. Not 80 million. The troodontids have had 66 million years to build their cognitive complexity, not 80. And 66 million years is less than 80 million years, which means the cognitives of the alternate world's present are not quite as far along the cognitive gradient as the 80 million year checkpoint we visited. Here is the honest accounting. In the alternate worlds present, the cognitives are remarkable animals. They are, by any reasonable measure, the most cognitively complex non-human animals that have ever existed on this or any other planet we know about. Their social structures are more complex than those of chimpanzees. Their communication is more structured than that of any non-human animal in our world. Their tool use is more flexible, more innovative, more regularly applied. Their cultural transmission is richer, their individual relationships deeper, their memory longer. But they have not crossed the threshold into language. Not yet, not quite. The elements are there, the vocal learning, the structured combinations, the individual variation in repertoire, the cultural transmission of vocalizations, but the element of reference, the ability to use a vocal signal to stand for something absent, to talk about a thing that is not physically present in the moment of communication, is not yet solidly present. It may be emerging. There may be proto-referential signals, conventions that are beginning to carry symbolic rather than purely indexical meaning, but it is not language in the full sense. What does this mean for civilization, for written history, for the question of whether something in the alternate world could have built the technological infrastructure needed to, say, launch satellites or write code or produce the digital recording you might be listening to right now? The honest answer is no, not yet, maybe not ever. Evolution does not run on a schedule, and the cognitive gradient does not guarantee arrival at any particular destination. The alternate world is full of extraordinary minds, but not of the kind of mind that builds machines. And there is something deeply peaceful about that if you let yourself feel it. A world full of minds that think but have not yet, perhaps will never, translate thought into the kind of world-reshaping power that our species has wielded. A world where the cognitives navigate their social complexity and their elegant communication and their curiosity without ever deciding to mine the earth for metals or burn the forests for fields or redirect rivers for irrigation, not because they are virtuous, but because they haven't gotten there yet. Maybe they never will. Maybe the alternate world in its present moment is a world that thinks in the way that an individual mind thinks before it has learned to write, richly, complexly, in full and vivid experience, but without the external storage that writing provides, without the accumulated cultural complexity that writing enables. A world of minds, but not of civilization. A world of thought, but not of record. A world that will leave no fossils of its thinking, only the bones of its bodies and the stones it moved and the marks it left in the places where it lived. In the alternate worlds present, on a quiet hillside in what would be our version of Europe, a group of cognitives is going about its evening routine. They are grooming each other with their three-fingered hands in the attentive, methodical way that social primates do in our world, not because they have lice to remove necessarily, but because the touch itself is the social language, the tangible form of relationship maintenance. One individual sits slightly apart, holding a flat stone and turning it over in its hands, examining it with the systematic attention that tool-oriented animals give to interesting objects. It is not building anything with the stone, it is just looking at it, feeling its weight, tipping it in the last light to see how the shadows change, putting it down and picking it up again. This is what curiosity looks like at the edge of cognition, in a creature that is somewhere between the animal and the something more. This is the beginning of a process that, in our world, eventually led to here, to this story, to this moment, to you listening. In the alternate world, that process is still beginning, still at the stage of looking at stones in the evening light and finding them interesting, still at the stage of reaching towards something that it does not yet know how to name. Let that image settle. A cognitive, in the alternate present, looking at a stone in the fading light of a world that never was. Curious, alive, thinking something that we will never know in a way that we can barely imagine, on a hillside that in our world is probably a parking lot or a wheat field or a forest of introduced species. Let the image be what it is, beautiful and strange and full of the particular loneliness of a path not taken. 55 million years. The alternate world is in what, if you could feel the time rather than count it, might be called its long afternoon. Not the morning of its alternate post-Cretaceous history that was the first 10 or 20 million years, the period of initial diversification and adjustment. Not the evening that will come when specific climatic or geological changes force a new round of adaptation, but the long, warm, productive afternoon of a world that has found a configuration it is comfortable with and is exploring it fully. Long afternoons have a particular quality. The urgency of morning is past. The day has settled into itself. The animals of the afternoon are neither hurried nor yet slowing toward evening. They are simply present, fully and completely doing what they do in the time they have in the world they have found themselves in. This is the quality of the alternate world at 55 million years, and it is a quality that we do not have in our own world's present, where the urgency of a changing climate and a rapidly simplifying biosphere has stolen the afternoon's calm. The alternate 55 million year world is, by several measures that ecologists use to assess ecosystem health, at or near peak. Species diversity is at its alternate timeline high, more species than existed at the KPG boundary, and more species than existed at any previous point in the alternate timeline, because diversity in undisturbed ecosystems tends to accumulate over time as new niches are discovered and existing niches are more finely subdivided. The primary productivity of the alternate world's ecosystems, the rate at which solar energy is converted into biomass by photosynthesis, is at its highest because the forests are at their most extensive, their soils at their most developed, their mycorrhizal networks at their most efficient. The food webs are at their most complex. This matters because complex food webs are more stable food webs. A well-established ecological principle is that ecosystem stability correlates with the number and diversity of connections in the food web. An ecosystem with many species linked by many feeding relationships is more resistant to the loss of any single species than an ecosystem with few species and few connections. If one prey species becomes rare, predators with many alternatives simply shift to eating other things. If one plant species fails in a bad year, herbivores with access to many plant species simply eat other plants. The redundancy of a diverse food web is its resilience. The alternate world's 55 million year food webs are, in consequence, extraordinarily stable, not static. Nothing biological is static, and the alternate world has been continuously evolving throughout its history. But stable in the sense that the overall structure of the system, the distribution of organisms among ecological roles, the general pattern of who eats what and who is eaten by whom, persists through fluctuations that would have simplified a less diverse system. In a concrete sense, this stability means that the alternate world's major ecosystems have been able to persist through the gradual climate changes of the last 55 million years. The slow cooling, the shifting of rainfall patterns, the rising of new mountain ranges, without the kind of catastrophic simplification that our world's ecosystems have undergone through the ice ages and their associated extinctions. The alternate world has had ice ages, not quite as severe as ours, because the intact forests and the large dinosaur populations have modified the climate toward greater warmth but cold periods nonetheless. And the alternate world's ecosystems have weathered them by adapting rather than simplifying. What does a stable, complex 55 million year afternoon look like in practice? It looks like a landscape where every level of the ecosystem is occupied by multiple species filling similar roles, where no single predator, no single herbivore, no single plant dominates the system to the exclusion of alternatives. It looks like a landscape where the removal of any single species would be absorbed by the redundancy of the system rather than cascading into broader collapse. It looks like a landscape of extraordinary visual complexity, so many species, so many different body forms and behaviors and life strategies that a naturalist standing in it would not know where to look first. This is the most difficult aspect of the alternate world to convey in language: the complexity. We are accustomed to ecosystems in which the dominant species are few and easily named, where the ecological relationships are broad strokes rather than fine detail. Our world has been simplified by the ice ages, by the human hunting of megafauna, by the introduction of non-native species and the removal of native ones, by the transformation of natural habitats into agricultural and urban land. We experience the simplified world and think of it as natural. The alternate world's afternoon shows us what natural actually looks like when it has been running undisturbed for 55 million years. It looks nothing like our managed and simplified modern ecosystems. It looks more like the most biodiverse tropical forests of our world, the Amazon, the Congo, the forests of Southeast Asia, but distributed across the entire globe rather than confined to a few remaining patches, and more diverse even than those remaining patches, because those patches have been isolated and reduced and therefore impoverished compared to what they once were. Here is something specific to fix the abstraction in a concrete image. At the 55 million year mark in the alternate world, the tropical regions are home to something that has no equivalent in our modern natural history, a diurnal herbivore guild of extraordinary richness. In our world's tropics, the large diurnal herbivores, the browsing and grazing mammals, are represented by perhaps 10 to 20 species per region. In the alternate world's tropics at 55 million years, the equivalent guild contains perhaps 50 to 80 species per region. Each occupies a distinct part of the feeding spectrum. Each eats at a distinct height or specializes in a distinct plant type. Each has a distinct body plan and distinct social structure and distinct relationship to the predators that hunt it. 50 to 80 species of large herbivorous dinosaurs in a single region, visible from a single vantage point on any given afternoon. The visual experience of being in that landscape would be overwhelming in the best possible way. There is too much to look at, too much happening simultaneously, too many shapes and sizes and behaviors competing for attention. It would be the natural world at full volume, undimmed by extinction, unfiltered by the simplifications that our own world has accumulated. In the cooler late afternoon of the alternate 55 million year world, the large herbivore herds are beginning to drift toward the water sources where they spend the cooling hours of the day. The movement is not urgent. This is the long afternoon, and nothing is urgent. The hadrosaurs move in the way of large, relaxed, confident animals, slowly, browsing as they go, stopping to examine interesting plants or to engage in the brief social interactions that maintain the herd's internal relationships. The titanosaurs move more slowly still, their massive bodies requiring more time to change direction and more deliberate navigation around the trees that dot the floodplain. The predators watch. The large theropods of the alternate 55 million year world are not different in kind from their ancestors, but they are different in degree. More patient, more capable of sustained observation, more selective in their targeting than the generalist opportunists of the Cretaceous. They have had 55 million years of hunting to refine their strategies, and their strategies show it. They wait, they read the herd, they identify the outliers, the slow movers, the ones whose posture or movement betrays some vulnerability. They do not rush. The afternoon is long. This too is a form of intelligence, the intelligence of patience, of reading a complex social situation and acting at the precisely right moment. Predators in the alternate world are not just evolved for physical capability, though they are certainly that. They are evolved for the cognitive demands of hunting prey that is itself cognitively sophisticated, that has alarm systems and group defense and the accumulated knowledge of generations of predator-prey interaction. To hunt successfully in the alternate world's 55 million year present, a predator must be as socially intelligent as its prey. And it is. The evidence is in the behavior, in the coordinated strategies, the patience, the reading of social cues in the prey herd, the individual variation in hunting style that suggests learning rather than instinct. The arms race between predator and prey in the alternate world has been running for longer than our species has existed, and it has produced animals on both sides of the predator-prey boundary that are, in the functional sense, genuinely sophisticated social actors. The afternoon light is golden now. The specific quality of late afternoon light, that warm, low amber angle that makes everything it touches glow as if from within, is the same in the alternate world as in ours. Light does not change with the creatures who walk in it. The titanosaurs in the floodplain are gold in this light. The hadrosaur herd moving slowly toward the water is gold. The predator on the ridge is gold, its feathers catching the light in ways that our eyes, limited to 3 color channels, can only partially appreciate. The long afternoon is passing, as long afternoons always pass. In the alternate world's 55 million year present, the world does not know it is an afternoon. It does not know that there will be an evening. It does not know that we are watching it from a different timeline, imagining its richness through the medium of words and the particular ability of minds to construct the absent from the described. It simply is what it is, completely, in the light that is available to it. Let the golden light of the alternate afternoon rest on you where you are. Let it be the last specific detail before the story turns toward its close. The world at its richest, doing its patient, extraordinary, unnoticed work. Before we come to the final quiet chapters of tonight's story, there is a collection of facts about the actual dinosaurs, the ones that actually existed in our timeline, the ones whose bones we have been reading for 2 centuries, that deserve to be gathered in one place and held together, because the alternate world we have been building tonight is not purely imagination. It is built on the foundation of what we actually know about the creatures at the heart of the story, and what we actually know is, in many ways, more extraordinary than the popular accounts suggest. Here is a fact that most people who consider themselves knowledgeable about dinosaurs do not know. Some dinosaurs could almost certainly see color that we cannot see. The 4th type of cone cell in the eyes of birds, sensitive to ultraviolet wavelengths beyond the range of human vision, is present in all birds and was almost certainly present in many non-avian dinosaurs as well, since it appears to be the ancestral condition for the entire dinosaur lineage. This means that the visual world of a velociraptor or a triceratops or a hadrosaur was more information-rich than ours. Colors we cannot see were part of their everyday experience. Patterns on feathers and frills that are invisible to us were, to them, the equivalent of faces. Here is another. Dinosaurs grew faster than almost any modern animal of comparable size. A Tyrannosaurus rex reached its adult body weight of roughly 8 tons in about 20 years. A growth rate of roughly 400 kilograms per year during the most active growth phase. This is not the slow, steady growth of a reptile reaching its maximum size over decades. This is the fast, demanding growth of a warm-blooded animal investing enormous amounts of energy in reaching adult size quickly, because reaching adult size quickly meant reproducing sooner and surviving better. The bones of Tyrannosaurus show growth rings similar to those in tree trunks, and they show the rapid early growth and the slowing of later years. They grew like very large birds, because they were. Here is one more. Some dinosaur species migrated, not just seasonally, but over extraordinary distances. Fossil trackways, sequences of footprints preserved in ancient mud, recording the passage of dinosaur herds across ancient landscapes, show evidence of directional, coordinated movement over distances that can sometimes be reconstructed to hundreds of kilometers. Individual trackways within these assemblages show that different animals in the herd maintained consistent spacing and moved at consistent speeds. The signature of coordinated group movement rather than random individual wandering. These animals were going somewhere together. They had done it before. Their descendants would do it again. Here is something even less well known. Some dinosaur species appear to have made nests in colonies, returning to the same nesting sites year after year, and to have cared for their young in the nest for extended periods after hatching. The Hypacrosaurus, a hadrosaur, shows evidence of nesting in large aggregations, dozens of nests in a relatively small area, suggesting that adults gathered in breeding colonies the way modern seabirds do. The eggs were incubated. The young, based on the state of their bones at hatching, were not fully developed and would have required parental care for weeks to months. This is not the behavior of a simple reptile. This is the behavior of an animal with strong parental instincts and the capacity for sustained care. And here is one of the most surprising and least discussed findings of the last decade of paleontological research. Some dinosaurs appear to have had sleep cycles. The neural structures that produce REM sleep in modern birds, the stage of sleep characterized by rapid eye movements and, in humans and birds, by dreaming soul, appear to be conserved across the dinosaur lineage. Recent studies of bird sleep have shown that REM sleep is present and substantial in birds, including during flight in some species. The conservation of this sleep stage across all living dinosaurs, birds, suggests that it was present in non-avian dinosaurs as well. The dinosaurs dreamed. We do not know what they dreamed of. Here is a fact about scale that shifts how you see the Mesozoic. The time gap between Tyrannosaurus rex and Stegosaurus is larger than the time gap between Tyrannosaurus rex and us. Stegosaurus lived approximately 150 million years ago. Tyrannosaurus lived approximately 66 million years ago. The time between them is 84 million years. The time between Tyrannosaurus and our present is 66 million years. From the perspective of Tyrannosaurus rex, Stegosaurus was a historical animal from deep in the past. as remote as Tyrannosaurus is to us, plus another 18 million years. The age of dinosaurs was not one moment. It was a span of time 3 times longer than the time that has passed since their extinction. Here is something about dinosaur intelligence that current research is revising. The old canard that dinosaurs were unintelligent, that they had brains the size of walnuts, that they were essentially living machines running on instinct rather than thought. This is wrong in ways that the last 2 decades of research have made increasingly clear. The encephalization quotients of many dinosaur lineages were not dramatically lower than those of modern birds and reptiles. The troodontids, as we discussed, had encephalization quotients comparable to modern large-brained birds. But even the supposedly dim-witted sauropods had neural architectures that allowed for complex sensory processing and behavioral coordination, which is required by the sheer fact of navigating an enormous body through a complex landscape while maintaining social relationships with other equally enormous individuals. Here is a fact about dinosaur color that was only discovered because of advances in electron microscopy. Melanosomes, the pigment-producing structures inside feathers and skin, can be preserved in fossils, allowing paleontologists to reconstruct the actual colors of some feathered dinosaurs. Anchiornis, a small feathered theropod from China, has been reconstructed in actual color from its preserved melanosomes. It had a gray and white body with a reddish-brown crest on its head and red and white wing feathers. It was a specific individual color. It was not a generic prehistoric animal. It was a creature with a face. Here is something about how the KPG extinction actually played out that complicates the simple story of the asteroid. The extinction was not instantaneous. The initial impact was followed by months of impact winter as soot and debris blocked sunlight. But the recovery from impact winter was itself interrupted, in many regions, by the continued eruption of the Deccan Traps in India, which had already been altering climate for hundreds of thousands of years before the impact and continued for hundreds of thousands of years after. The dinosaurs were hit by 2 climate-altering events in sequence, and the combination was worse than either alone. In the alternate world where the asteroid misses, the Deccan Traps are still erupting. The alternate world is not unaffected by geological events. It is just missing the second punch. Here is one final fact to carry into sleep. The most recent non-avian dinosaur fossils are found in deposits from within feet of the KPG boundary layer, the thin band of iridium-enriched clay that marks the asteroid impact worldwide. Triceratops fossils have been found within meters of the boundary, representing animals that were alive within weeks or months of the impact. They were not declining, they were not dwindling, they were present, thriving, living their ordinary lives until an afternoon 66 million years ago when the sky turned to fire. They did not know what was coming. How could they? There is no evolutionary preparation for an asteroid. There is no adaptation to an event that has happened only once in the history of complex animal life on Earth. They were simply alive, the way all things are simply alive until they are not, and then they were not. And in the alternate world, they remained alive, and the 66 million years of life that followed in that alternate universe is the subject of tonight's long and quiet story. What they became when given more time, what the world became when given more of them. Hold these facts like stones in the hand, each one specific, each one dense with implication, each one a window into a world that actually existed, not the alternate world, but the real one, the actual Cretaceous that these animals walked through on their way to the end. They were real, they were specific, they were, in the ways that matter, present. Let their realness be the last waking fact, and let the sleep that follows be as deep and patient as the rock that holds their bones. Imagine, for the last time tonight, that you could step into the alternate present, not as a visitor with a mission or a question, just as a presence, just to stand somewhere in that world for a moment and feel what it feels like to be in it. You are in a temperate forest. The trees are not ones you recognize. The lineages of the alternate world's forest plants have had 66 million years more evolution than the trees of our own temperate forests, and they have become something different, not unrecognizable. Still trees, still following the architectural logic of vertical trunks and spreading canopies and root systems reaching down into soil. But the details are different. The bark texture, the shape of the leaves, the smell of the resin. Everything is slightly, consistently, insistently different in the way that a word in a language you almost speak is different from the word you know, recognizable in structure, shifted in detail. The light in this forest comes down through the canopy in the same gold-green columns that light always falls through forest canopies, broken and softened by leaves. The quality of light is universal. It does not depend on which species of tree it passes through. You could stand in this alternate forest and close your eyes and feel the light on your face and think that you were somewhere in our own world, in the old-growth forests that we have largely lost. The sound is different. The sound gives it away immediately. There is no birdsong in the way we know birdsong, the clear, musical, individual territory songs of passerine birds that fill the morning of every forest in our world. There are sounds from the canopy that serve similar functions produced by the complex vocal apparatus of the avian and near-avian lineages in the alternate world's trees. But they are not quite right. The tonal quality is different, the rhythm is different. It is as if birdsong had been reimagined by a composer working in a different musical tradition. And deeper into the frequency range, below the canopy sounds, there are the larger vocalizations, the low resonance of a hadrosaur group somewhere in the distance, their crests producing the long, deep notes that travel through the forest like a felt vibration rather than a hard sound. The brief, sharp call of a small theropod somewhere to your left in the undergrowth, the silence that follows the call, and then the regular silence that returns, the forest resuming its baseline after the momentary interruption. You stand still. In our world, standing still in a forest produces a particular experience. You become invisible, and the forest's inhabitants begin to behave as if you are not there, and you get to see things that moving observers never see. The same would likely be true in the alternate world. The animals here have learned, in their 66 million years of uninterrupted existence, to pass the difference between a predator standing still and a feature of the landscape. If you are still enough and patient enough, the forest will treat you as furniture. Something moves at the edge of your vision. You don't turn your head, just your eyes. A medium-sized ornithopod is browsing at the forest edge, where the canopy has opened slightly, and new growth has come up in the extra light. It is the size of a large dog, bipedal, with a small crest that flushes faintly with color as it feeds, a color in a range you can just barely see, suggesting that the full display is occurring in frequencies slightly outside your visual spectrum. It has not noticed you, or it has noticed you and decided you are not interesting. This is what the alternate world's present feels like from inside it. Not dramatic, not alien in the science fiction sense of alien, just different in the accumulated way that 66 million years of divergent evolution makes a world different. The same physics, the same chemistry, the same geology, but a completely different biological community living in accordance with that physics and chemistry and geology, following rules that have been refined for longer than we can really feel in our bones. The cognitive sits 20 meters away on a fallen log. You did not notice it at first. It blends into the forest the way an intelligent animal learns to blend when it is observing rather than acting. It is watching you. Its eyes, forward-facing, binocular, large for its head, are fixed on your face with an attention that feels specific, personal, directed. It is not the blank regard of an animal processing you as threat or not threat. It is something more sustained than that. It is looking at you the way you are looking at it, with the quality of attention that a thinking thing brings to something it has not encountered before. You look back. Neither of you moves. The forest continues around you both. The ornithopod browsing, the canopy sounds proceeding, the deeper resonances from the hadrosaur group in the distance. And in this stillness, in this mutual regarding, there is something that you can barely name. A recognition, perhaps. Not of the individual. You have never met this animal, and it has never met anything like you, but a recognition of category. This is a thing that thinks. That is a thing that thinks. We are both things that think, in a world full of things that do not, and for this moment we are looking at each other. The cognitive breaks the moment first. Not with alarm, it does not run. It simply redirects its attention, looking away from you and examining the fallen log it sits on, running a finger along the bark with what looks like curiosity. Then it stands, stretches in the particularly dinosaurian way of extending one leg and the opposite arm simultaneously, and walks away into the forest without looking back. You are alone in the alternate present. The forest continues. The light moves through the canopy as the sun moves slightly in the sky. Somewhere below the range of clear hearing, the hadrosaur group has moved closer, and the felt vibration in your chest from their vocalizations has become more present. It is not unpleasant. It is like standing near a source of infrasound, the sensation of something enormous being peaceful nearby. In this world, the enormous things being peaceful nearby is a constant of existence. The world is full of them. You share your space with animals that dwarf you, that move at the edge of hearing, that make the ground tremble when they walk. In our world, we have not shared space like that with truly enormous animals for tens of thousands of years. We cleared the megafauna from most of the planet long before recorded history. What it feels like to exist in a world that still has them, to feel small in the way that smallness used to feel before we inherited a world we had already emptied, is not something most of us have direct experience of. It feels like this. It feels like standing in this alternate forest, hearing the deep notes of the hadrosaurs coming through the air and through the ground, knowing that something very large is nearby, and being okay with that, being more than okay with it, being restored by it, the way certain kinds of vastness restore the mind by reminding it of its own proportions. The alternate world is vast. 66 million years of life, uninterrupted, has made it vast in the way that only time makes things vast. It is not a dramatic vastness, not the sudden overwhelming scale of a mountain or an ocean seen from the shore. It is the slow, accumulated vastness of deep time, the sense that everything here has been here a very long time, that the relationships between these trees and these animals and this soil have been developing since before our own species existed, that you are standing in the middle of something that has no need of you and no awareness of your absence from its history and no investment in your understanding of it. That is a good feeling. That is the right feeling to have in this moment, in the alternate present, in the quiet world that never was. To feel small and brief and somehow free of the particular weight that comes with being the species that is responsible for everything. To stand in a world that does not need managing, that has not been damaged and does not require repair, that is simply complete in the way that wild things are complete, full of their own logic, their own history, their own ongoing experiment. The light in the alternate forest is beginning to change, afternoon deepening toward evening. The forest sounds shifting into their evening register, different species becoming active, others quieting. The cognitive is long gone. The ornithopod has browsed its way around the clearing's edge and disappeared into the understory. The hadrosaur group's vocalizations are fading as they move away, following a route that probably took their ancestors through this same valley for thousands of generations before them. You are alone in the alternate present. It is quiet. It is full. The distinction between alone and full is one that this world makes easy to hold. You can be alone in it and full at the same time, because the fullness is the world's, not yours to provide or protect. Breathe. Let the alternate air, which smells of resin and wet soil and the particular sweetness of plants that have had 66 million more years to develop their chemistry, fill whatever space remains in your mind. Let the alternate light, which is the same light as our light filtered through different leaves, rest on your face. Let the alternate silence, which is the same silence that exists between sounds in any world, settle. This is the world that never was. You have been in it for hours now, walking its alternate history from the moment the asteroid missed to this present quiet forest. You have met its giants and its thinkers and its ocean creatures and its polar survivors and its nocturnal hunters. You have asked its questions and held its answers lightly. You have let it be strange without demanding that it be familiar. Now let it go. Let the alternate forest fade at the edges, the way a dream fades when you notice you are dreaming. Let the trees become less specific, the sounds become less distinct. Let the world that never was return to the space where it lives. The space between what happened and what might have happened, between the rock that hit and the rock that missed, between the world we have and the world we lost before we were born to miss it. You are in your own world now, the real one, the one where mammals inherited the earth and one of them is lying in a comfortable place listening to a story about what might have been. That world is also full of wonder, even if it is a smaller wonder than it once was. Even if it is a quieter wonder than the alternate present, the wonder is still there. It is in every bird that sings outside your window, every dinosaur descendant still carrying the deep history of that dynasty in its bones and feathers and three-toed feet. Every bird is a dinosaur. Every bird that has ever sung outside your window was singing with the voice of a dynasty 230 million years old. Even in our world, the world where the asteroid hit, where the mass extinction came, where we eventually appeared and began our own complicated story. The dinosaurs are not gone. They are here. They are at your bird feeder. They are in the park. They are in the sky. That is the last thing to carry with you into sleep. The dinosaurs are still here, and in the quiet world of tonight's story, they never left. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it really helps us continue making more content. Anyways, see you in the next one. Now, the story is done. The alternate world is quiet, the forest is dark, and the hadrosaurs are sleeping, and the cognitives are dreaming their unknown dreams on their hillside, and 66 million years of uninterrupted life are resting in the dark in the world that never was. And you are here, in your world, in the dark, in the particular warmth of where you are, the same planet that held both worlds, the same stars overhead, the same moon where it is tonight, casting the same pale light across a world that chose its path at the moment of an asteroid's passage through the atmosphere. Let your body be heavy. Let it settle into whatever surface holds it, your spine long and soft, your shoulders dropped away from your ears, your jaw unclenched, your hands open or loosely closed, or however they have found themselves in the quiet hours. There is nothing to hold tonight. Nothing needs holding. Let go. Your breathing is slow, slower than it was at the start of the story, slower than it was when the asteroid hit if you were there, slower than the geological processes that make and remake this planet on timescales we cannot feel. Your breath moves without effort, in, long and full. A pause at the top, as long as it wants to be. Out, slow and complete. And the natural pause at the bottom before the next breath comes, unhurried, on its own schedule. Let that rhythm be the story now. The breath. Just the breath. The oldest rhythm your body knows. The rhythm it has been keeping since before you had any memory of it, since before you knew what a breath was or that you were taking them. The body breathing itself, the lungs doing their work, the heart doing its quieter, deeper work underneath. The alternate world is still there, in the space behind your eyes. If you look for it, it is there. The green of the alternate forest, the long necks of the sauropods moving slowly against the evening sky, the eyes of the cognitive on the fallen log, looking at something it has not seen before, curious and calm and entirely itself. Let those images be soft. Let them be the texture of sleep rather than the sharpness of thought. Images without edges, colors without names, movement without direction. You are drifting. Let yourself drift. The alternate world drifts with you, becoming less specific as sleep approaches. Not the forests and the animals and the questions and the facts, but something softer, the quality of it, the feeling of a world that has had more time than it needed. That kept going when it could have stopped, that filled its available space with the extraordinary patience of life doing what life does. That patience is available to you tonight. The patience of something that has been going longer than it can remember, that is not in a hurry, that will still be here in the morning. Your body has that patience. Your breath has it. Let the patience be the last thing before sleep. Not a thought, but a quality. Not something to think about, but something to rest in. The dinosaurs are still here, in the birds, in the bones under the ground, in the morning when the birds begin before the light comes, in the way a crow moves its head to look at something with that characteristic sideways attention that is so old, so much older than we are, in the small flying things and the large walking things and the sound of wings in the dark, in every living system on this planet that has never stopped, in the fact that life here has simply never stopped. Rest in that fact. Life on this planet has never stopped. The alternate world went on. Our world went on. Life went on through the ice ages and the volcanic winters and the meteor impacts and the oxygen catastrophe and every other challenge the planet has offered in 4.5 billion years. It went on because that is what life does. It finds a way. It always finds a way. And so do you, in the smaller sense, in the human sense. You find your way through the days and you rest at the end of them, and the rest prepares you for the next finding. That is enough. That is the whole of it. That is what tonight is. Sleep now. The alternate world is quiet. Our world is quiet. Everything that needs to be said has been said. The birds are sleeping. The forests are breathing their slow exhalation. The rivers run without anyone watching. The cognitives on their hillside are still, their complex minds quieted into the deep simplicity of rest. And you are still, and the night holds you, and the story is done. Sleep. If you liked this video, let me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious about that. It is always remarkable to think about people in dozens of countries, across every time zone, all drifting towards sleep while exploring the same ancient and imagined world together. And if you have a suggested topic for the next story, another ancient world, another unanswered question from deep time, feel free to leave it in the comments. Sweet dreams.